Bro, I have like the best money, like PC money can buy right now.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, with the cast on dodge,
Oh, the
it's
stream just
ridiculous.
went live.
Oh,
Just right now.
are you gonna turn
The
the
need for
volume
new
up? Cause
equipment.
I'd rather listen
One of the
to
major
on your stream
areas that
because
needs a
I
lot
gotta
of
go
attention is
downstairs
the
to
player's experience
make
of the
some
map.
food for my son.
We've made a
So
lot of
I
changes
can't
here.
really. I don't want to
Alrighty,
be.
I'm gonna close the
First,
game. We're gonna
in-game
watch
maps have received
this.
a balanced pass
Let
with
me
a
know
number
I
if
of
it's too
also
options
loud.
for
died in
different changes.
Simulacrum just
We
now
have
too.
magical rare monsters,
To
number of essences,
I
strong boxes, and
don't. I
previous
got
surround
stun lock.
effects. You should generally find maps
What the
more
fuck?
rewarding than before. Maps generally
God damn
specialize
it!
in one or more of these elements, but they will be particularly rewarding in. Now towers are a thing that's very important for players to run often, but we only had one of them. We wanted to add more variety here as soon as possible,
Hello.
so we've added 4 more tower maps. Alpine Ridge,
See ya, Gogol.
Sinking Spire,
Where is this?
Oh, I gotta watch this. They're
Bluff,
adding maps? That's awesome. Oh, why is it glitching? It's glitching.
and Mesa.
There we go. Mesa is a fantastic
Also
map.
redone
Hell
the
yes.
existing Lost Towers map to make playing there less boring.
Sick.
We're now also spawning more maps with bosses.
They showed some
The rate was intended
elemental
to be 1 in 4
invocation
maps, but in reality the rate was much lower due to
infusion,
some
I
maps
think it
being
is.
unable to spawn bosses.
Oh, I hope
We've
that's
increased
good.
the rate to compensate for this issue so that we can get the actually intended rate. We're also adding a new type of tablet that allows you to add bosses to your maps with its own mod pool.
Nice. Fuck yeah,
Strong
bosses.
boxes also needed some love. They now spawn monsters faster, have a less annoying fog
Ooh.
effect, and have also received changes to the timings and effects of the mods on them. Now, let's
Thank
talk about
God. I
visibility of
fucking
effects.
hate doing
Many
strong
maps
box right
had
now.
too much clutter, preventing
Good.
effects on the ground from rendering.
This is
causing you
looking
to be
good.
unable to see and dodge them. We both changed the level of clutter on some maps
So far.
and has changed some effects to make sure that they are always visible.
Yeah, so far.
In
Everything
addition,
they're adding, this
elemental
looks like
explosion
wins.
effects have had visibility improved. Stick around for longer before they explode, and disappear without exploding if a rare monster dies. Volatile
That
parts also
elemental
way
skill
easier
still
to
looks
see before
bad.
they explode.
But we'll see based on numbers later.
Now we've also increased the zoom level on the Atlas, done a pass on various terrain collision issues in many maps. We've also improved the load times of opening the world map and
Nice.
Atlas panel. And we also now show the biome of a map on the hover for it. For other in-game content systems, we're
Good.
focusing
Good
on getting
move,
all
good
the
move.
rewards in line with what they should be. For Delirium, we recently fixed a bug which caused Delirium monsters to just not spawn after the starting part. And we've also buffed the rate of simulacrums dropping by 20% to make
Oh,
it more
good.
in line with the rate of finding the expedition and ritual bosses.
It probably needs more than 20%,
For
honestly.
ritual, we've made omens now appear in the ritual tribute window 60% more often.
Mm-hmm.
For expedition, we've improved the rarity from the shops, but we'll be wanting to make some more substantial changes to the rewards for
Ooh,
this league later on.
nice.
Now, one of the major concerns that we're often seeing is that getting to play Pinnacle content just takes too long, and that when you do finally get there, you only get one attempt and don't get a chance to learn the boss. In order to address these concerns, we're making the following changes. First, we're making the Citadel spawn closer to the center of the Atlas, and we've also added an effect so you can see them in the fog of war from further away.
Oh,
This makes
that's
them much easier
beautiful.
to find. To address the problem of only
Yes.
having one attempt, on the Arbiter of Ash,
That
you
is
now get
fucking
the
lovely.
6 respawn attempts.
Mm.
6
Respawns
on
can only be
Ash.
triggered by the person who put in the keys, and everyone on your party will be respawned at the same time. Leaving the map still forfeits your attempt.
So we
so
should
you'll still
farm
need
and
to fight
sell
boss
the
with the road
fragment
that walks onto
now
the map.
before they lose their
Higher
value because
difficulties
it's
of
gonna
the
be a
boss
lot
will
easier
lower
to
the
get.
number of respawn attempts you get.
Everybody's going to be
But
wanting
you
to
should
do
know
them
the
now.
mechanics of the fight by then, right? Now, we'll also be adding respawns to other Pinnacle content as well over time.
Over time, okay. Not right
Another
away.
thing that players have noticed is that there are less keys from Faradin Citadels on the market, and thought that it was because the Citadel spawns less often. It turns out, though, that this is just because the boss kills players more often than the others. We've made a few changes to that boss to bring it in line with the other bosses.
Maybe I should hold
A lot
off
of
on doing the
people have reported
Citadel
that many of our
until
unique
after the
items are feeling
changes come in.
underwhelming. Uniques are often designed to be build enabling at high levels, even if they're low level uniques. But we realize that we do need to make sure that more uniques feel powerful when you first get them at low levels too. In this patch, we are buffing a lot of uniques. These changes should make finding uniques at lower levels a lot more fun, and make subsequent character playthroughs more fun too, when you have some great
Okay.
uniques to use.
A little blurry, unfortunately, but
We're also changing a few other things to make finding rares better
Nothing
at
that
high
we're
levels too.
using so far.
First, we're changing mod weightings a bit to make sure that there are less bad mods. Another fix is making high tier items no longer cull the highest tier modifier of a given mod type. This bug caused bows and crossbows to not spawn with attack speed at tier 5 rarity, and rings to not spawn with life at tier 5 rarity. Another change we're making is to make it so that socketables such as runes can now be overwritten with another socketable.
Okay, good.
Now, as we continue to
Finally.
play, we still
That's
find
a
Oh,
win.
mounds
you
of
can
anomalies
unsock
with
it
some
now.
my
monsters
God.
and
Oh, thank
bosses that can
God.
be nasty if you encounter them.
Man, that
This
was
patch
bad
contains
before.
a pass
That's
adjusting
so
a
much
large
better.
number of those monsters and bosses.
Amen.
We'll save the full list for the patch notes, but there are a significant number of changes here that should address many cases where monsters or bosses felt too hard in certain circumstances. Here are a few examples to get a taste of what kind of changes you can expect. The Silverfist Commander roll now does a lot less damage. Plague Bearer's Detonate Dead can no longer be used from off-screen and has better telegraphing.
The monkey, everybody
Forsaken
complains
Miners
about the
throw less
monkey.
grenades, have improved visuals, and deal less damage.
I don't like the guy on
And Lost Man
Savannah.
Zealots can no longer meteor you from off-screen either, as well as many other changes just like those. One of the big issues for players on consoles is that the web-based
Oh, I
item filter
know.
system is
The
currently
sockets
not
for
working.
sure.
This means that they can't use item filters like the PC users can.
Oh, item filters
The
on console.
0.1.1 will be enabling the same system that PoE 1 has, which allows you to subscribe to item filters on the website. For now, this will be done on the PoE 1 website to allow us to get this feature
There you
out
go.
as fast as possible.
Console item
Later on,
filters
we'll improve
fixed.
the user experience of this and put it on the Path of Exile 2 website. This patch also contains a bunch of other smaller changes and bug fixes that I'm sure you guys will appreciate, like buffing armor and scavenged plating, showing the
Good.
number of uses left in your charms, as well as an effect when they trigger,
The Song of the Exiles.
fixing the music that Una was supposed to play in town,
Yes, Una fix is #1 required.
Uh-huh.
and plenty of other little fixes and improvements throughout the game. Now, we have a huge amount of much more meta-shifting changes that we know we want to make. And one of the best things about having the game in early access with the endgame is that we now have a much better idea of where we want character power to be and what the balance of bosses and monsters should be relative to that. But those types of
There we
changes
go.
are going to have to wait until we are ready to make a new league with a new economy for people to play in.
Okay, so they're not meta
It's still a little
changing
while
yet.
away yet, but in the meantime, we'll be continuing to identify things that are causing frustration and try and address them. I want to thank you guys for playing and hope to be doing more of these in the future.
So
Later.
attribute stackers staying alive. No
Alright,
change
so
to
there
the
you
build.
have it.
Holy
Pretty
shit.
Awesome. We are now going to
Well,
call them,
Temporalis
get them
too, I
ready
guess.
for the
And that means
interview.
Magic
So we're
Find
gonna
is
go
saying-
to a screen here.
Magic Find is
be right
never
back, be right back type of screen here.
broken
You'll
though.
hear no audio, and it'll just be a blank
It's
screen
just-
for probably 5.
it's
10 minutes at
required.
highest,
That's the
and now
only
we're gonna do
issue.
an interview about what we just.
I
saw.
mean,
Give us what
at least you don't have to fucking suck an item rarity gem
Yeah, that's
like in
true.
PoE 1. You know what I
I-
mean? I mean, in PoE 1, it's always good to have rarity, or even quantity gem.
Oh,
You
man.
remember that shit?
I definitely
Okay.
didn't use it, and I suffered through it because of it. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the point of the game is you loot, right? Like you get your
Mhm.
character as powerful as you can, and then you add in as much rarity as you can afford to,
Mhm.
without
We have
losing
switch
too much
sockets
stats.
now.
I think the way it is working right now, though, it is a lot more rewarding than PoE 1 in a way.
Mhm. I mean, I still haven't
Uh,
ever seen a mirror, but it definitely feels like if you don't have rarity in, just nothing pops up on the filter ever.
Yeah. I mean, most of it is fucking trash anyway, because I didn't know about the fucking shit with the rings not able to spawn life on certain tier. Like, what the fuck? But, yeah, I mean, but the economy is kind of shitty right now anyway.
Yeah,
But like you
most
say,
definitely it is.
it is softcore standard, so I mean, it's not gonna get any better
Well, as it
until
stands,
League starts anyway.
as
The
it
actual
stands with
league.
these added maps and with the fixes to armor, that's gonna make a lot of people happy because armor is bad, being off-screened is bad, and it looks like they're changing the Pinnacle bosses so they no longer one-shot you.
And the gem
Oh,
slot, the
and the
rune
gem
slot,
slot? I know, I know,
oh.
I know. Holy crap, this is,
That's the biggest one for me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cause
The
I
biggest one
had
for me
no
is
gem
a
in
loot
my,
filter.
Oh yeah, you're on
yeah.
console, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah,
is the
I'm
economy on console, by
satisfied
the way?
just with that. It's the same economy on PC. We share it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You
Oh,
just,
Yep.
I
Yeah,
don't,
we use
weird.
trade side same as you. We play
Yeah, but
Oh,
do
together,
you
you know.
trade with PC people or just console people?
Yeah, I can turn off and play only with PlayStation, but why would I?
yeah. What's the
And
point?
there is an option to just play with PlayStation people, and that's a good option when you play PvP games, you know, where
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
PC
yeah.
has an advantage. So
Oh yeah,
if
definitely.
you don't want to get your ass whooped, but actually I was playing a predecessor, the Paragon uh thing that they made,
The
and
volume now.
it's a MOBA,
Hello,
and we
everybody.
play
So
against
here we are.
Xbox and
Just real
PC
quick,
normally.
now that we have the
So
audience here,
All
well,
right.
I'm gonna have
just
Jonathan
used to
one more
play on
time say something real quick, just make
I
sure
gotta
we can
look
hear us well.
into
We'll get
why.
feedback
I
from the
wish you could
chat.
have like an instant replay of
Hi,
how
I'm
you
Jonathan
die.
Rogers, game director on
I
Path of
fucking
Exile
died
2.
Simulacrum. I don't remember
Sir
what it was,
Mark.
but I just got stun lock and
Hi,
fucking
I'm
dead.
Mark. Hello, this is me speaking,
Oh,
and
fuck.
I didn't want to say the same thing he
did they
said.
release
You
the
can.
patch notes?
All right, and then
Seems
lovely
fine,
co-host Gazi.
Haven't seen it yet.
Lovely co-host. Mic check. Mic check. 1 2 3. 1 2 3.
Excellent.
I
So
like
with
how
that being said,
the
Gazi, why don't you take it away with the
you
intros?
can open up the fucking Atlas
Hi.
screen fast
Welcome to
too.
Tavern Talk
That
episode.
weird
We
slightly
still
lag
have no
is
idea what
really
episode we're on,
bothersome.
and we're gonna keep up with that trend. We
there
have
is
with us my lovely
upcoming
co-host
changes,
Section,
and
the lovely two individuals that is
Yeah, but there's
basically
no
but
actual
what's
patch
the
the
out
date
yet.
on
OGs at this
this?
point. We got Mark and
Yeah,
Jonathan from
no,
Path of
this
Exile
is
2 Brand
December
New. How you guys doing?
16.
Oh, doing great. I
There
mean,
is
you know,
one
like it's really
from,
good to get back into things again. We
yeah,
had a good
there's one
break.
upcoming change,
You know,
PoE
like
The
and
2,
change is good.
yeah,
As
I don't know,
it
just
cost me a bit in a
2.011.
good way.
actually looking at the problems again. As much as you know, it can be painful sometimes. But
Ah,
We
yeah,
don't
patch
know
getting
notes
yet.
through it,
will be
getting back
published
into
in
things.
few
Yeah,
days.
disconnected for a
Keep an
little bit.
eye for the
Not too
news.
long,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
just a little bit, and now back, which is awesome.
Okay.
But no, it was
Yeah.
it was a long
Yeah, I
burn
don't
last
think they
year,
will
so it was
nerf
good to get a little bit
a
of a
lot.
break over that Christmas.
Cool.
Just
But yeah, lots to address,
we
lots
are
to change.
safe
Excited.
I
for
guess
now.
It seems
I'm not gonna
it
buy
seems like with
Temporalis then.
the break, you guys still managed to get a lot
Oh,
of
it's
changes in.
Last year
The
then.
review video we
You
saw
can
is
still buy it and
fairly
enjoy it.
substantial, so that's exciting.
No, I
that's,
tested it.
that is for the most part just stuff that
The one
we
build I really enjoy is
did,
Cast on Dodge, but
like,
it
you know,
crashed my map,
last week
so
and
Last week,
I'm,
and this week.
Yeah.
I'm losing
The
money that way.
maps, the extra 4 maps, some of those did have some work that was
Well,
done.
sorry guys, I'm
Using it
A
gonna.
little earlier, but for them,
on this build
because we
is
knew we needed more towers,
not
and we're
that
just getting
great.
them in. But pretty much all that stuff is just stuff that we're just doing last week
Oh, I
and this
didn't
week.
even know you
Like
joined
we
chat,
try to
Lena.
move fairly quickly when we can.
Sorry.
But yeah, the thing now
Sorry.
is of
I
course
gotta
going to be
rebalance
like,
my volume on this. This
one
is
issue we kind of
so
realized we
loud.
had is like, okay,
There we go.
how much do we
That's better.
concentrate on fixing problems people have right now, and how much do we
Yeah,
concentrate on
the
the next
Discord
big kind
is
of
much
content patch? And
louder
so that's
than
like kind of the tricky
Twitch
thing we have to maneuver around at the moment. And I guess my feeling is that so long as there's like big
by
problems that are
default.
causing people to have like a bad experience, I kind of want to
Okay,
make
I'm
sure that those get
happy.
addressed as soon as
I'm
possible.
happy if
At least where we can,
the
so that we're making sure that things are as
filter
best a state we like some kind of
work
point of
on
stability, so that we can concentrate on
PlayStation,
having
I
the
would
larger
be
kind of like content patch after that.
ecstatic
That's great to hear.
because
So for this episode, or
farming
this interview, or
anything
whatever we're gonna call
rather
it,
than
we've done what we
rituals
can
are
to make sure that we
just
let the community
is
get their
just
voices heard. So most of the
Mhm.
questions we're gonna
stupid.
go through is questions collected almost
Who
exclusively
knows how
from the
many
community.
divs
We have a
and
couple
perfect
buckets for some recent questions
jewelers
and some
or
warrior
I
questions from
missed.
Darth, and we have some menu questions as expected from my side of things. But most of the questions will be taken from the actual community. So I'm just going to kick us off, so don't waste anyone's time.
So they're
And
going
we're
through a
gonna start
lot
with
of
a question saying,
build-specific stuff
which
right
of the
now.
changes that has been showcased was the team most excited to be able to announce?
Well, I guess that I'd say that like these changes, obviously, while the players are happy with them, we're not exactly excited about them per se because these are just like fixes to things that are problems, right? So the stuff that we're
I'm
excited about is the
farming
stuff we're not
some
talking about,
maps.
which is the content that's
I
coming up in
did
the
only
in the larger
travel
one that'll have an economy
Sekmas
reset and so on.
few
So there's obviously a
days,
lot of stuff there, but for this
so
stuff, it's just like really like, okay, what can we do to make sure that people are
I
having a good time?
swapped on maps
That's
a little
that's
bit.
kind of the main thing I would say.
Yeah, which is exciting
I
in
kind of
its own.
miss what
Sure,
did they
see
say
how
about
much more we can
the
improve, how many
Citadel
people having a
specifically.
good
Are they
time.
buffing
Yeah.
the drop rate?
So that's good, but
With
yeah,
the
really, it's like
fragments?
there's no one thing there. Where we're like, oh, yeah, this
Yeah,
is the
no,
amazing thing. It's like
they're
it's all just like,
buffing the
let's make
frequency
the
of
game
the
not
third
suck.
one that
That's
was
kind of our main goal.
one or
So
something.
one of,
Perspective.
Because
so one of the changes for
the
in-game
boss
maps
in it
is the
has
changes to, you
less
mentioned
spawn
monsters,
rates,
chests,
so
rare monsters.
Citadel
What
spawn
impact are
less.
you guys hoping that this change
So that's why you
specifically is
have
going to
two
have
of
in
them
in-game mapping?
priced keys priced for 50x
Um,
and the third
Well, I
one
want this.
like
Well, there's a couple
33
things.
dips.
A, it is just a general
Okay.
will
probably
just
30%
get
more kind of monsters, items, etc.
And,
from inherent maps.
That's fantastic.
You get the thing where now the
there's this
inherent
thing
map
there,
is higher
you'll
value,
see
and
the
thus
citadel
proportionally
in
the
the
league is
pod,
less impactful.
so
Say
you
Oh,
Breach,
yeah.
know
which
which
is
way to
obviously
go.
in
That's
its own
huge
universe
one.
of craziness right now.
Well, Breach is
But
just
the
good.
idea is the base map is
Keep
more
Breach.
rewarding, and thus
Range,
adding the
like,
extra
towers
content
or
is less
something, but
necessary for say map
anyway,
sustain.
I have like 3
Um,
spots in
the
my
other thing
map
is it
that
will
I
interact
could
with different
go
rolled
through
maps
the pod,
differently. So
but
we
I'm not sure
tried
which
to do
one,
this
because
better
there's a
before
maps I
early
need to
access
do to
began, but
go
again, it should
on
be
either
now
side,
certain
but
maps
I'm not sure which way to go
and
because
certain mods that increase the chest, the rarity of chests, the rarity of monsters will have different benefits. So that's kind of cool that I want people to learn that over time and see what's beneficial, well, what multiplies better, and then you combine those things where you have this map's better for number of monsters, whereas this map's worse for number of monsters because they're multipliers. So like a really small map versus a really large map.
Are they actually care?
Before they were relatively consistent. Now that large map might have twice as many monsters as that small map, but it has the same density
Yeah.
of monsters. So you don't just have big open empty spaces of nothing. So obviously now the number of packs, if you multiply that up, it has a much grander effect on the big map than it does the small map. But
They're
the small
trying
map
to make
is obviously
rarity
easier to clear,
less
faster
important
to clear.
by making more mobs the
So
way
say
to
if
actually
you're
farm good gear.
optimizing for bossing, you're probably going to try and have the small be applying more bosses to
I
small
want more
maps
mob
using the new
density.
tablet.
Yeah.
Or if you're doing
Like in general.
leagues that
Most
more
definitely.
like Breach, you might
Map
want
density
smaller
is
maps that
fantastic.
way
It
because
makes it
you're
so much
focusing
more
on just
satisfying.
farming breaches as
So many
opposed to
dead
say
spots.
Yeah. with the
delirium. So
pops.
Expedition favors
Pretty
that
annoying.
doesn't really care if the map is large or
Mhm.
small. So
Your mic's pretty
having those
quiet
different
there,
kind of
Lena,
axes
just so
is
you know.
really interesting. Where
Alright.
you are thinking about that as you go. Now people have to learn that, and that's cool. I actually want people to learn that and kind of post all their details on like this map's really good and this map isn't. And we've accounted for layouts, how fast they are to clear, all of that stuff. So certain maps that were more tedious to clear now have pretty drastic advantages on at least 1 or 2 different axes. So they might have a higher number of minimum monsters, rare monsters, higher spawn rate of rare monsters, magic monsters, rare chests, who knows.
There was a lot of
Does
that
that mean
balance
we
that
have
you
to
really
go
do
through
until you
all
actually
of
have experience
Mire?
playing them, right? Because it's hard to tell when you're just in development and you're not on a real character. Like, is this map actually fun or not, right? And the end game is we've got the least amount of testing, so it really did require like, okay, some actual proper
Oh
play
my.
and be like, okay, is this map to really answer the question of is this map good or not? So now when we see that, then we can be like, okay, we need to make this change or that change in order to sort it out. So there's just been a lot of just like sanding off all the rough edges the end game had by virtue of the fact that it just really wasn't as tested as what the campaign was. Go on.
That all being said, I'd say one thing it has introduced is it has added more bad luck or
Fuck yeah,
mistake
I'm gonna try some of that,
protection to
man.
some degree, because if you would like fully juice a really small bad map,
Bye, Pablo.
that minimum of bad is now much higher. And so like you all of a sudden now have invested all this wealth into this bad map, you've run it and you're like, what the,
Yeah,
I
not
didn't
too
get
sure when
anything
the
back
patch
from
will
it.
come
So
out, but
the minimum is certainly now much better,
Hoping
which should hopefully
today or
protect a
tomorrow.
lot of people who are falling out of map sustain. Whereas like a lot of the
They
good
generally
players
don't
who are a
talk
bit more
about stuff
observant, a bit more
unless it's
familiar
ready
with
to come
PoE
out.
1 were just like happily sustaining maps. And so yeah, you had these two ends of spectrum, and hopefully we've raised the minimum now with these changes.
So 2 follow-up questions. Since this was a question for later, but since we're talking about bad maps in particular, something you mentioned here, what is your guys' opinion on the current state of maps in the game? Not so much from a monster point of view, but of a layout of maps. So there are some maps people don't like as much. There are ones people really do like as much. Is your opinion that you need maps, for instance, like Mire, Augury, Vow Factory? These are some of the least favorable maps. Do you think you need maps like this in the game in order to more appreciate the more common ones people enjoy? Or what's your stance currently on the map amount of variety that are in the game, put that way?
I guess ideally, like if so, I mean, there have been a few adjustments to things like that. Probably not, like we're not necessarily going to take every map people find annoying and change it like so that people don't in that way. But certainly there should be balance changes to make it so that they feel at least worthwhile, even if they do have some more annoying layout or something like that. So I mean, I assume you feel the same way about
there's
that.
some standout things. Like obviously you shouldn't have the levers that you just can't dodge roll out of and you just die, or the levers are just spawning burning ground on them, right? Obviously this stuff is just objectively wrong and objectively bad, and that will be fixed. But
Okay,
a lot
that's
of that
good.
contributes
No
to like
more
this is the
characters
worst
dying to
map
burning
because you go
ground
pull a lever and die while doing
on
so.
Augury.
And then there's the ones that yes are just like inherently worse layouts, especially for certain builds. But then again, now using this other thing where it's like,
Nice.
actually, well, those maps may now spawn the most amount of rare monsters or the most magic monsters or just the most amount of monsters. You're going to have to go figure some of that stuff out. And some people might like that. People with less, screen clearing AoE centric builds probably don't mind some indoor, more mazy maps if they're going to get the benefit or feel like they're getting the benefit from, more rare monsters. They've got, I don't know, more single target or a more concentrated DPS or whatever. They don't feel so bad now for running that as opposed to just running the, sand spit where you can just like nuke entire screens every
The bad
2
case
seconds.
of this though was definitely the tower map because it was kind of, it's like you mandatorily have to run that map, and so having that be not great is like not a good situation. So hopefully we've addressed that one. Like that was really urgent to address because it's like because it's mandatory, right? You can't just skip it. So that one had to be sorted.
Yeah, turns out it's maybe not a good thing where you have to approach a room full of monsters that you don't know what they are and they're super dangerous and you can't see them and it's a narrow bottleneck and you have to run in and just die.
But even so, like obviously the variety helps with that, but also the new version of that map is now based on the top floor tile set, which is like got more variety and like it's easier to deal with. So that should improve a lot of that.
Bit of visibility.
Yeah, exactly. So it
more
helps a lot.
open, less tight bottlenecks. Still they're still relatively narrow here and there, but yeah, much better to clear.
Okay, so Sun Temple
So
actually
one
good.
more follow-up here, and I'll pass it off to Ghazi. In the reveal, you mentioned that the boss maps, for instance, were supposed to be more common than they actually were. And so this comes to a very common question about Waystone's sustain. So what was your opinion on the state that previously was with Waystone's sustain, as well as do you believe this impact of additional bosses are obviously going to impact Waystone's sustain, so you think this is going to help alleviate some of the feedback we've seen related to there?
That one's pretty interesting because, and this is probably going to be a controversial thing to say, but like we don't know that there necessarily is a problem with Waystone Sustain as such. So that means we have to look into, if people say that there is, and that means we have to understand why that is, because I don't think that's the experience that like we're having as we're playing ourselves. And like, so there's always this thing where it's like we want to hear what the players say, but then we always want to confirm with our own experience that like when we do what they're doing, that we're getting the same experience before we can kind of make a good decision about what a change would be. So I don't know that we've identified why it is yet that players are having problems with Waystone Sustain. And so that's like, and this will change this obviously because there's more bosses and so on. Like that's the thing you can do. And killing bosses will give you, upgrades and so on. Like that'll help with that. But I guess I sort of like, I feel like we need to understand that problem more before we can really work out what exactly needs to happen with it.
There's certainly more to learn there, but as I said before, the minimum's now higher for sure.
Right. So it can be just people running into bad specific maps that like have specific problems that someone who's.
I suspect it's also just a lot of people struggling with the difficulty and dying.
Not everyone's playing Monk.
It's obviously very different if you're dying even in
Sorceress.
30% of your maps, 20% of your maps. I mean, even 10% of your maps. It can make that difference. So yeah, there's definitely 100% more to look into there. But like, I personally, I went to from tier 1 to tier 15 maps in a total of 32 maps, and I've sustained since. And then you see the things where people are talking about map sustain. I'm like, okay, am I in a different universe? And the answer is probably
in a different universe.
The answer is probably yes, I am in a different universe. But from a purely anecdotal standpoint of my own, I try and I'm going to see how it is for myself. And I'm somewhere else. We need to look more into this somewhere. So we have other people at the office as well, of course, and you get their anecdotal experience, but we need to look at this from a much broader perspective. But either way, what we've just put forward is an improvement to all of that. Higher maximum, sure, higher minimum, and a bit more safety for bad luck. But what it doesn't really account for right now is safety for people
for that they
dying
came out of
failing 50% of their
vacation.
maps or 80% of their maps.
There is a slightly more subtle thing going on, I think, which it's kind of unfortunate how this turned out, but effectively, because you can power through the map tiers really fast,
There are a lot of comments,
it means
like,
that you don't
go
get a
on
chance to find the
vacation if you
gear
just,
that you would otherwise have
halt
as you
your,
went through those tiers.
game
And that
and
means
shit,
that
but
effectively, when you
why
do,
wouldn't
like,
they?
you might be
I mean,
playing higher
they
tier
do
maps
every
than what
year,
you really should be
their
playing for the amount of
company
like wealth that
policy
you
is
found,
that
and that means that
they
your map
always
sustain is
do,
bad
so
because you're dying
why
more
wouldn't
often
they?
because
I
you're
mean,
kind of playing higher
doesn't
tier
matter.
content, and that's on us
thing
because
I'm
we
definitely noticing,
need to adjust
they're
that
not
so that
talking
you
about
so that
fixing
you only
the
start
data breach
effectively
for
in order to
people
progress
getting
up the
hacked.
tiers, it needs to be more that you're
That's
like
something
we
they
need to
need
sort
to
of gear check you more as you go up a little bit to make sure that you've got the gear you need before you're going up the tiers.
I
But
mean,
this is going
they
to be a
will
really
ask.
subtle and tricky thing to get exactly right. Like there's quite a lot to that, and that's kind of
I'm
more of a
not
thing that
watching
we
the
can
stream
sort of
now.
look at
I'll
over a
just
bit of a
watch
longer period
the
of time because it's going to require some adjustments. But yeah, that's just sort of
video
another one. But
after.
there's quite a lot of implications to all of that, and
Can't
I don't know
really
that we're quite ready
concentrate
to
on
like
that.
understand
My kids
exactly
are
what
still.
would need to happen for that to happen. But that is kind of one of the issues that we're seeing is just like, yeah, effectively people playing
I mean,
content
how
that's
would you
harder than what we
patch
would
that?
hope they would be playing for the gear that they have, which then causes the deaths, which causes the sustain to be bad.
That's what
So
I'm
that's kind of
thinking.
that issue.
No, the
Thanks
hacking
for the detailed
stuff.
answer. I'll throw it off to Ghazi for the next questioner.
Yeah, next in line, we're actually going to circle back to what you mentioned, Mark, regarding Expedition, not caring about the layout and whatnot, but you also mentioned, I believe it was in the video, right? You mentioned more substantial changes to
Yeah, maybe.
Expedition coming later. So the question is, do you have any particular examples of these things you're hoping to accomplish with this mechanic?
Yeah, I can't really say what it is, but what I can say is it is intended that every league, sort of, I'd say without promising it, because we're allowed to make exceptions. It is kind of intended that every league provides some sort of access of character or crafting power that is abnormal. And so, you know,
Different that you can't get
yeah,
anywhere
different.
else.
Mostly character power here. So aside from the unique items, obviously they can or sometimes don't provide character power that can be attained elsewhere. This is more about something else that's, you know, similar to say the instilling your amulet with a notable. You know, it's something that only that provides. It gives you more power than you would have had if you had never done it. And so ideally every league would kind of do something like that, or provide a crafting avenue that would then give you something like that, or give you more power in general. But yeah, we just kind of have the vendor mechanic where you can do some crafts, and none of those crafts are abnormal. They're not adding extra benefits or mods or anything outside of that. So yeah, we have intention to add something to that, and probably to a lot more of them over time. And as you get new ones that each obviously have this thing in mind, where we're trying to say, how can we make characters feel a little bit more powerful by engaging in that content? But yeah, Expedition just didn't quite get it when we ported it over. Like, you know, we discussed heaps of things, like we could add some more ROG crafts, so to speak, now that even though it's now 3 out of 4 of them crafts.
It definitely needs something else, like
yeah,
for sure.
it just needs something cool, something better, and something not rushed. Which is we're in a position where we're going to rush something, and it's like, hold on, let's not do that. Let's get it right and do it a bit later.
Fair.
So
I like that take.
no crafting
Another
bench
question we have
right
is regarding
now,
the Arbiter
but in
of
the
Ash
future.
now having 6 resurrection or revive attempts, right? And other attempts to, or adding other attempts to other pinnacles over time. I guess the question comes down to why wait with adding extra attempts? To
Ultimately, the reason is just time. So it might even be that in the patch that we do deliver, that some of those other ones are already done. It's just that because the video had to be made last week, and like we were like, are we gonna, like, we knew we would get time to sort out the Arbiter, and we were like, we don't know if we're gonna get time to do the others, so we'll just like promise that one, and then if the others come, then that's just a bonus. But yeah, effectively, there's like a little bit of trickiness around each one to like just work out all the states of everything. Like, I mean, if you're looking at like just as a random example, and this isn't obviously that big of a deal, but it's just, you know, someone has to do it, is like for the breach one, for example, we have to decide like, okay, so we can't really let you have the economy, like you can't reset the whole map, because then you'd get the drops from the breach a second time.
already gone.
So then it's like, okay, we have to make sure we put a checkpoint on the thing, and that means you have to like do some, someone has to go write some code to like make the breach thing work correctly for checkpoints, and you know, it's just like random stuff like that, just little details that just mean that like it'll take a, you know, a little bit longer to do those other ones. But I mean, we're not talking a really long time, right? We're just like, someone will get to it in the next couple of weeks.
This guy's really hyped. I love it.
I'd say King in the Mist. King in the Mist will almost certainly be done, because it's an isolated boss fight in a room with nothing else going on. But for the logbook and for the breach one, you have to have some manual intervention, and we have to really make sure that there's none of that, like, you know, respawn at checkpoint at this exact point in time, and all of a sudden you get the loot again kind of thing going on, because yeah, that obviously can be quite destructive.
So yeah, it's literally just a time thing. We'll, as I said, we'll do it in the next couple of weeks, just as we, you know, get these things going.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Speaking of Arbiter, a couple questions related to Citadels here, just some fast ones. Are Copper Citadels really the same spawn rate as all the others? That's what happened?
I mean, we generated a bunch of Atlas state and checked that they were equivalent. I mean, I don't know what to so we really were not intending to make a Monopoly game, McDonald's Monopoly game style thing here. It really was intended to be equal. So yeah, as far as we could tell, it was just the just that the boss had that exploding minion thing that like was the damage just busted on that?
Nah, well, maybe, but all of his little attached zombies, like during the phase 1 of the fight, they, when he summons the sandstorm and you get protected, and you have the zombies coming at you, they blow up after they die, and in the map version, the in-game version of this fight, some logic was missing. I don't know what happened, and those would then explode at the end of this phase 2. So you'd be like, oh, I killed him. You run in to get your loot, and 8 zombies just explode and insta-kill you. And so what you found is a whole bunch of people were just straight up like succeeding at the fight and then just dying straight afterwards. So that accounted for some portion of it. And then he was just harder. Certainly the death rate, even excluding the one-shotting zombies, was just much, much higher than the other 2. But yeah, we have now a cheat that generates or simulates generating like, I think it's 1 billion different blocks and calculates how many of every map spawned and everything like that just to test this specific Citadel case. And yeah, everything we could find generates exactly the correct amount of the 3 things. So
speaking
the 3 Citadels.
Speaking of spawning Citadels, did you guys happen to catch any of the conspiracy theories related to, corpses pointing in directions, etc.?
It was so ridiculous. Whatever. People come up with crazy things. I don't know.
All right.
I can tell you. I see. The thing is, I'm tempted to actually do something weird like that now, just to just to bait the conspiracies. But no, there was nothing. There was nothing weird going on.
It's just RNG. Like you have to. I did catch
it's
in
just
the video.
RNG. That's all it is.
It said closer to the cinders, so there is something to being farther away from your spawn point.
So but basically all that is literally just that there where you start, there's just a radius you have to get to before they start spawning. But after that point, it's just they just spawn the same rate. And we just moved it closer just because since you can't really tell like where the
any of them can spawn.
That's like not obvious, right? And the main thing we want to do there is just not have a Citadel spawn like right next to where you start, because that would be ridiculous.
Further doesn't make it more likely
effectively we just shrunk that down a bit because it was a little bit large. And then the other thing as well is that now that you can see them in the fog, it actually makes them so much easier to find. We actually intended, we're like, oh yeah, we're going to totally buff the number of these that there are. But after we made the change to seeing them in the fog, it was immediately like, oh shit, there's actually tons of these everywhere. We just weren't seeing them before. It's seeing them makes a big difference.
Seeing them is probably going to be all they really had to do.
It mentioned in the video less bad mods on mobs. Can we get some more detail?
Sorry, it wasn't mobs. That I think because it was in the item section, and maybe you misheard that slightly. But the bad mods thing was talking about items. So effectively, there's some stuff going on here. So effectively, what we did, because a lot of people were talking about issues with higher tier rares as you get to harder content. And effectively, when we sort of looked into this, we sort of worked out like there were some anomalies around like what happens when mods get cut out on the lower levels, just based on kind of like somewhat random things about like how many top tier mods there are of certain types and things like that. So what we've done is it's not like huge changes, but we've kind of effectively done things like I think accuracy went down a little bit, and it was like I can't remember the other change.
Accuracy went down, life on kill, mana on kill on weapons at least, and then attributes on hybrid gear.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the hybrid gear attributes, and then there was also the bug where effectively high tier rares weren't getting the ability to generate top T1 mods of certain types, which I don't think it was actually necessarily as big of a deal as what people might have assumed, but because it wouldn't have affected that many items, but we have fixed it. So, for example, it was just impossible on a T5 bow to ever get attack speed.
Once it was a certain item level.
Once it was a certain item level. So yeah, but you couldn't even get T5 realistically except from
couldn't
higher
hit a
level
T4
stuff, right?
You
still could occasionally, but whatever. The point is like there was a few things like that were going on, and we effectively just adjusted that stuff, and it should result in generally better rares when you're talking about like high end, like high tier stuff. So we'll just sort of see how that works out. The adjustments are not like mega, but they are there, and they should sort of improve things, I think, a little bit.
And just for clarity's sake, for the viewers, when you say top tier, like tier 1, you actually mean like tier 12 or whatever the top tier is, right? Because tier 1 technically is the worst. Here.
Sorry, yeah, it's so annoying that we have like tiers going in reverse directions in different contexts. Like, but yes, what I mean is whatever the top tier of that mod is, in some cases it was getting cut out. In fact, I worry that even in the article that we're going to say that's actually incorrect. So I just need to fix that because I think in the article that we posted, it says T1 item affixes, which is actually backwards. So I need to go and fix that after we've done this.
We also need to make this consistent everywhere and sort this tiered situation out.
Yeah,
I do have a follow up on that. Yeah, it is sometimes very frustrating dropping something that has a high tier, but I don't know if that is the highest tier. Would it be possible? Like, is there something you guys are considering adding?
I think we are adding a thing that displays on the mod if it is the best tier relatively soon. But again, we need to also just figure out a little bit more around this because we've got this whole T1 versus T random
the reason why there is resistance to having T1 mean the top one is because then if we add another one later, it changes what all the tiers are, and there was sort of some discomfort around that. But then maybe it's still better to just do that anyway. I don't know. That was the original thinking behind that, but
because you don't know.
Whatever. It might be less confusing if T1 meant.
Yep.
No, because the other thing as well is that map tiers are like the T1 is the bottom one again, and you certainly wouldn't want to reverse that. That would be weird. So yeah, I don't know. Like probably. Yeah, whatever. This is just a random small topic, but just one of those things.
Understood.
Yeah.
Speaking of items and quality, one of the most requested additions, item filters, coming to console. So I'm sure many people are very excited about that. Speaking of the topic of consoles, can we expect more quality of life things coming to console? For instance, I very commonly see ask for things like text UI size, etc. Do you have any plans related to quality of life improvements for console?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly need to do more there. I mean, I don't have any specific things to announce there, but effectively we need to make sure that that experience is good. And one thing that I know, this isn't actually technically a console thing, but another thing that we will be doing for people who use controller soon is like the ability to fast swap between controller and the PC UI just by like immediately in game, because that's something I believe there was even an implementation of that. It was just a little bit too dodgy to release on early access start. So we just need to get that sorted and then test it. So that'll be another one. But in terms of just general console stuff, I mean, look, there's just more we can do, right? And we've got our guys on console. They'll be looking into these things and just making changes. The text size one, I do think needs some addressing. It's a little bit tricky because there's kind of a lot of things all through the game that need like futzing around with. So that I definitely appreciate that. And like part of that is literally because when we're in this is kind of bad, but it's like in the studio, we literally have like a big screen and the couch that's near it is like relatively close. It's like an actual real world scenario. People often sit a bit further away, and we probably should have been thinking about that. Yeah. Things like that just need some addressing for sure.
Fair enough.
All right. Putting aside bugs and tuning that is expected for early access state, was a question that I was asking about. What are the players' feedback that surprised you guys the most?
Have a good one.
Good one,
I know you were saying. I mean, I guess from my perspective, it's like we had a lot of worries about things being broken. We just didn't know what those things were going to be. But then you were saying before that just the level of brokenness did surprise you as far as like some character builds and stuff, right?
I had my whole okay. Obviously, people are going to find broken builds, but like we escaped millions into tens of millions, and then we escaped tens of millions into hundreds of millions in measuring in DPS, and then we escaped DPS into comets per second, and then like you got to this point where it's like, okay, we're just off the reservation here in terms of just, when you 1 week in and someone's like, here's my 450 million DPS build that hits the Pinnacle boss for 141 million damage and one shots in the 3-player party, and I'm like, well, where are we? Like, what happened?
The thing that I found a little bit sad, and I guess we should have just expected this, is that like I sort of expected that the first few times people were playing the Pinnacle boss, that would kind of be a normal fight. But in reality, the first few times people played the Pinnacle boss was just completely like a disaster because like they just had some build that was
it looks
to
like
get to
the
the Pinnacle
monk
boss the
isn't
fastest, you also have to have like a ridiculously broken thing going on. So you just ended up with just like you don't even get to see the mechanics, and it was just like that was a bit sad to me.
30 million
with more lives, people will actually be giving it a shot instead of just selling it off to those people who do one shot it. But we'll see how that goes. But
the tricky thing about this has just been that, like, okay, so we do generally want, I mean, we do generally want to not do mid-league nerfs, and there was a period there before Christmas where we were making some changes, but we weren't even considering those to be mid-league nerfs because they still left things in a state that was still like very, very good. Like from our perspective, and like maybe the players would disagree with this, it was kind of like when we nerfed something there, we were still leaving it in a state where it's still some of the best shit ever. And so there would, from our perspective, we were like, well, there'd be no reason to have to re-roll your character after this change because like it's still crazy. So we didn't even really consider those to be mid-league nerfs in the same way. But then, obviously, there's going to have to be some changes because, like, there are just certain things that are just completely ridiculous. But one thing we've got now, and I kind of mentioned it in the video, is that like we actually have an understanding now of like what a character should look like. And so ideally, when we do our first like true balance patch, we should be at the point where we can be like, okay, here's like these like 10 things that need to come down, but then there's also like these other 50 things that need to come up to get to that point, right? So like ideally it sort of there should be a little bit of leveling there that occurs, but we really don't want to do that kind of patch without doing an economy reset because we actually need like to see what really happens when you get a new economy and all that sort of stuff. So and when I say an economy reset, of course, what I mean is a new league. Like we'll still have the old characters if you want to play them, but all the stuff we're going to be looking at will be on the new economy. But
whole new season.
in terms of like how it evolves.
Yeah,
that
it
way.
would be the same.
So
like in
yeah, that's
Diablo.
going to be like a tricky one. It'll take us a little bit longer. But that is also what we're working on in the background as well, is just like getting all of this stuff to where it needs to be.
So am I hearing that there's no nerfs coming in this patch then?
Good question.
Sort of what I'm taking from this?
I mean, there might be a few that relate to things that are just completely screwed, but I don't. I mean, it is not our intention to do a big nerf patch here. Like that is not our goal with this. Is like fix things that are annoying people and like make the game more playable. Whereas the goal of like the the sort of balance patch that's coming a little later would be like, okay, we'll have a new economy. We'll actually do like a proper balance pass where we get all that stuff like more.
Because you scared everyone with that executioner photo in the Twitter post. I mean, it looked like the guillotine was about to drop.
Okay, yeah, people look into things I think a little bit too much. Okay,
there's kind of three kinds of nerfs going on. Not on this patch. Just hold on. That was.
I do want to follow up though with the comment on the balance patch coming later, and you want to combine that with a economy reset. So is that you saying that there will be economy resets during early access on a regular basis?
Yeah, so there won't be. They'll be in a new league, so you still get to keep your old characters. But effectively, yeah, absolutely during early access there'll be new. Leagues. What I don't want to say is like whether or not the league as so when I use the word league, people sort of assume that means there's like a league mechanic that comes along with it, and we might do that or we might not. We kind of need to work out what's going on there, but it'll be a new league in the sense that it's a new economy that people can play through, and we'll be introducing significant stuff that would want people to make people replay as well as doing all the balance stuff and all that sort of stuff. But effectively, we need to do that because if you can't really just make changes to balance like significant ones without screwing people's characters over, obviously. So you need to have some kind of thing like that in order to be able to do that.
And that's the
just
kind
going
of thing
back a bit, like we have a kind of few classifications of things we do address when it does impact balance, and we are trying to be ultra conservative, but if it is bricking instances, as in it is
I don't
just
know why Diablo
absolutely
2
tanking
never
instances,
did
affecting
like
the
any
performance,
changes
and thus
in
affecting the performance for other
switching those
users.
leaks, you know.
But
I
we
always
have to
went
address
into
it.
a new
You can't just let that be.
Yeah.
Now we have to try and reduce the impact on
like
the server, and generally because of some sort of infinite loop or anything of the sort like that, or you know, something happening per frame that shouldn't happen, and all of a sudden now, you know,
like if you're getting the server frame rate to be like 1 FPS. then that is not alright, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to actually sort that. So that is something that we will do a mid-league nerf to address. But ideally in such a way where it still leaves the build perfectly viable.
Yeah.
It's just that it's no longer completely destroying what's going on.
The other things where it does nerf and has an impact is, of course, when there is simply something clearly not working intended. So like an example of that, which I won't try and pronounce, but the shield that increases effect of your socketed runes and soul cores, and that was just obviously applying to all of them, not the one socketed in itself. That is obviously a nerf. It was never meant to work that way. I don't think that really surprises anyone when that gets changed. It's very clearly not working as intended. So those two we're generally just going to pull the trigger on almost always. Right. We're still thinking like, okay, especially in the performance case, that's like blatantly, our fault and there is economy there, and then obviously there are people who are going to lose their character builds because of it. Maybe, hopefully not. We try and obviously bring down the frequency or the infinite loop element or the per frame while also buffing the damage. And then we make a note of it to like reassess this later when there's a new economy, and we'll come back and reassess that. But, often protecting the instances, protecting the server performance for other users, and obviously fixing bugs are, something we're going to do, and so that can have an impact. But just like at this point, preferably for all the other main nerfs where you're just blatantly nerfing someone's build or nerfing a build, we're trying to currently push that towards the economy/league reset kind of point. Yeah.
They only care about nerfing bug abuse, not actual
All
builds
right.
that would just have good
It's
interactions.
a very extensive answer. Appreciate that. That's one of the
That's
things
really
that
good
makes
sign.
this very fun for us to do. We ask a question,
Yeah.
we just lean back,
The people
and
with
you
like the
get to-
temporalis, I mean, it's not
I love it.
busting anything, but I think
we are
they
going to
are like
circle
bugs
back to what
wise,
you
but I
mentioned as
feel
well
like
earlier, Mark. You
that
said coming
might
back to
be
reassess
bug abuse on
the
their
decision
end
that's been
because
made.
it's literally crashing
And the
instances.
topic we're going to open up is the two-step
But
verification,
possibly not as
security
well.
for accounts with certain things that's happened.
I mean, could also
recently.
be server
So
issues.
the real
I don't
question that we
know
come
how
down
this
to
really
with
works,
everything going
but
down is, I guess the
maybe I
first
need
one
to
is,
invest
was
in
there a data
stuff.
breach at GGG?
Yeah, that's
Right.
true.
And following
I mean,
that
like
up with, are you
changing
going to reassess the decision?
items
two-step
per
verification?
se for that
All right,
reason.
so this is
wouldn't recommend.
unfortunately really sucks,
But
and I was
then
really
you also
hoping we'd get a
lose
post
the
about this before
the
we did this
portals
interview, but
for it. You
unfortunately
come
we haven't
back
quite
as like it
finished
never
assessing yet.
existed, but the key is
So
gone.
there has
It's
been a
sad.
situation where
Yeah.
someone got access to an admin account on our website,
Early access.
and we now understand how that happened. And we
Someone
also
got an
understand,
admin account.
we
What?
don't fully understand the scope of everything that occurred here, but we're sort of in the process of like looking at logs and so on. And there was a few really shitty things that occurred here that I'm very unhappy about. So the first one, just to say this, is that the thing that happened here was actually kind of the same thing that happened a while ago when through a Steam, effectively a Steam account was compromised through Steam support. So effectively what happened is one of our administrator accounts
Sorry, what did you
had,
say about admin
a
account?
Steam account associated with it.
Somebody
And this
got
was a
a
Steam
hold of
account
an
that the
admin
person
account,
who
and they were able to get internal
who
information.
had it attached didn't
Oh.
really kind of know. I mean, obviously they could have checked, but like they didn't really consider the fact that this was like this old Steam account they don't even use anymore was attached to their admin account. And so effectively what happened was that got compromised through Steam support. So I don't know like all the details exactly what happens there, but effectively what happens is that like they are able to somehow provide like details that they managed to find on someone, like the last 4 digits of their credit card information or whatever, they get through some other kind of means, and then they provide enough information to Steam support where they're able to get Steam to change the credentials on the account, which happened without us noticing, because once again this was an account that this person doesn't log into, so there was no like they didn't realize that this has occurred. And then another thing, this was compounded by the fact, and this one was really, really crap, that whenever a customer support person makes a change to an account, they there's like an audit log, right, of like all the actions, like the events that they've done. And this effectively means that like when we investigate like, hey, what's happening with this account that got compromised, like we obviously look at the events and see like, hey, was there anything, like what happened here, right? Did someone change a password? Did something going on with that? And there was actually a bug where the event for setting a new password on an account was incorrectly in the back end labeled as a note rather than like an audit event. And what that meant was that so notes are things that like customer service can add to people's accounts, and they can edit them and delete them. And so the password change thing being a note could be deleted by a customer service person accidentally, rather than being permanently there in a way that no one could change. And so that effectively meant that what was happening is the person who managed to get an account, they were compromising the accounts by setting a random password, then deleting the node afterwards to say that had happened. And so when we would look at accounts, we just wouldn't see this. And so it was like really not obvious to us that what was going on there. So I don't have like full information yet about exactly the extent of everything that happened, but what I can tell you is that 66 notes were deleted. So that would imply that 66 accounts were compromised. Now, it does extend slightly back further than what our log history is. So I think there's like, so we only keep logs for 30 days. And that's like a whole, privacy.
He's
rules
oddly
around
open
stuff,
about
means
that.
that's your log retention.
I know, right?
Now, there were
People don't
5
wanna
days
talk
before
about
that
their
where the
dirty
account was
laundry,
compromised.
but
But
he's
this is all
being straightforward.
pre-launch of PoE 2. So effectively, there were the 5
There's
days
pro and
back
contra
in
about it.
November when we don't have logs for, and then after that point, there were 66 accounts that were that had notes deleted. Now, the reason why I am using that phraseology here is because the things were deleted from the frickin' event stream, like we literally don't know what happened here. Like the only thing I've got to go by is the web server logs, which don't actually record like, you know, all the data that's sent in a web request. It's just like the address of the page they went to, right? So effectively we can see like basic information, but because the thing itself that they were doing involved deleting the frickin' records of the fact that they were doing it, meant that like, you know, yes, it's unfortunately very difficult for us to track down full information about this. Now, we are going to be posting a post with like all the information that we can possibly gather that we're sort of still gathering. And we were obviously initially very afraid that there'd been some kind of larger data breach here where like they would somehow had access to our servers or something like that was going on. Like because we had no idea initially, right? So we're kind of like, oh shit, you know, what the hell's going on here? But now that we've understood that the vector was via a Steam account like that, it kind of means that like effectively what they had access to was the same stuff that customer service had access to, and all of that stuff is logged except this one thing that was not like logged due to this other thing. And then since then we've also added a bunch of extra security stuff that honestly should have already been in place around this to sort this out. So all of that is to say that like, yeah, we totally fucked up here with like security stuff on this account. Like we're certainly not going to have any Steam accounts linked to, like we're going to audit, make sure that there's no Steam accounts linked to any customer service admin accounts any longer. Like that certainly needs to not happen if there's going to be this kind of attack vector. As well as we've added a few other measures that, you know, to just make sure that this sort of shit doesn't happen again. Yeah, all of that really sucks, and especially because, like, as I said, just due to the fact that the stuff about it is deleted, we can't like easily find out what even freaking happened. So there's going to be more investigation working out
robbing all the currencies.
what's happening here. But
like
yeah, that
more
seems to
than
be what
people got
occurred.
robbed.
So just to quickly, for the people that are going to give it like a quick recap, this was a social engineering breach. This was not like a server-side data breach.
Yes,
of an
exactly.
admin account.
So
I'm not quite sure.
This is a one-off, one account. It's now a closed case scenario. The viewers do not have to do anything on their side to worry about their information.
So the moment that we realized that something had gone wrong, we just immediately reset all the passwords on all the admin accounts and deleted all the sessions just to make sure that everything was kosher. So from that moment on, there was no more like accounts getting compromised or anything like that.
Sure.
And then now it's just been a matter of us like doing a bunch of log analysis, and it's actually quite like. Because the only way we've got it is the web logs, and it's taking a while just to process all the stuff, and there's obviously a lot of human investigation. Like we just haven't yet been able to prepare a full report about it, but we are going to be posting one hopefully in the next day or two.
But
that has all the stuff about that.
Yeah,
but that was just really crappy.
I've seen
going back
way
to the actual
more
question
than
about two-factor
66 posts
authentication.
about them getting
I mean,
robbed, and I know somebody
in this particular case, it wouldn't have actually helped because
he only
it was
lost 2
compromised
divines
through
and
our
a couple
freaking
of
support
exalties
interface, right? Except for that, probably it would have helped in the sense that if we had added two-factor, like if there was two-factor auth, presumably the bug about where it didn't
I'm
get
broke
logged and
too.
someone changed it wouldn't have applied to that because, you know, it's a new thing that they wouldn't have had the same bug for.
I only
suppose
have
it would have
one
helped in that sense, but
like
that's the thing with that. So then talking about two-factor auth. So first of all, I'm like completely not against two-factor auth in any regard. The only issue with it is that it's easy to implement two-factor auth. What is hard to implement is all the policy around how to recover when people inevitably lose their second factor. And so that's the kind of tricky part to actually deal with. And so like it's kind of one of those things where like, yeah, we will do it, but like we're just not quite prepared yet to be able to do it with all the customer support stuff that we have to do. And like, and it's kind of one of those annoyingly deep holes of like, okay, so like, someone loses their password, what do you do to verify it? Like, you know, the two-factor auth thing, what do you do to verify this? And it's like, okay, so now you start to have to worry about like what personal information can they give you, and then now it's like storing personal information, and then like
well,
the GDPR
if you log in
implications
via
of that, and like it's
Steam,
just like, it's just like a whole rabbit hole of just like random policy
though?
stuff that all kind of like comes around with that stuff.
PlayStation Network is also a thing, and that gets hacked seemingly all the time.
What I will tell you is that we're immediately going to add two-factor auth to all of our support accounts. You can bet on that, and that is not a problem. That is not a problem for us to do there because the policy around that is like, well, you just like walk in person to the frickin' you know, guy. If you lose it, then you can physically deal with that, right? So that one is how we sort it out. But as I said, we will get to it, and it is a serious thing. We definitely want to have this. It's just a question of just getting it done, really, like all the policy stuff around it and all of the like. Yeah, just as I said, it's all support nightmare around how to deal with it.
Well, I appreciate the extremely vocal transparency about what's going on. I'm sure lots of people here watching appreciate that as well, and we won't grill you about it or anything. So appreciate that information. We'll move on here to a little bit more fun topic, which is upcoming content for the game. So we've been asked, one of the most common questions we've had here is things like roadmap for cadence of releases. You know, you guys originally stated 6 to 12 months for full release, which spans leagues, you know, the question, how many leagues between? There's 6 classes. So if it's 6 months, it's 1 class a month. You know where I'm going with this. So, you know, can we expect any information in terms of the cadence of releases, upcoming things like weapons, classes, skill gems, etc.?
Right. So the cadence we want to hit is sort of something similar to the kind of league cadence that we've done before for PoE 1. So like that's like I think that it works. Things work the best when you've kind of got like a, you know, like releases that are fairly large that like have a significant amount of stuff in them to actually bring people back and play and so on. So you can kind of expect a similar thing like that. For the actual like what is going to be in each release, obviously I'm not going to talk about that because, you know, we'll save that for the live stream and all that sort of stuff. But effectively, yeah, I mean, like that's kind of what you can expect. That being said, there's also a thing where like so we want to be able to do the balance patch addressing the balance issues that we've talked about as soon as we can. But in order to do a patch like that, you need to have enough content in it to be able to make sure that you know, people actually come back and play it and like, that sort of thing as well. Like you need to be able to make enough changes and like add enough content that it's actually exciting. So we're going to work towards getting a like a PoE 2 sort of new league with new content in it basically as soon as we possibly can. Like so we're like I can't exactly say a date or anything, but like we're gonna rush for it, right? Like we're gonna really try and do it because we want to get to that point of stability of the balance that we're sort of happier with as soon as we can as well. So yeah, as I said, not going to say a date, but basically just look, we work reasonably fast. We're going to try and get it out as quick as we can. Hopefully we get that.
There will be a new class.
Yeah, they're gonna add
so I'm just going to go ahead and assume that new acts are going to be involved in this,
like
but I guess a little extra question to that when we talk about Act 4, 5, 6.
Druid and Huntress
is the plan to add like one act, or are you guys?
Yeah. So this is honestly
it's every 3 months.
This is honestly one of the freaking hardest questions ever, right? Like this is actually something that we've discussed back and forth so many times because like. If you're talking about it from a pure storyline perspective and like kind of what makes sense, like so there would be so imagine we release one act, right? It's like how does it fit exactly into having the leveling? Like, do you go like 1, 2, 3, 4 and then like 1, 2 again? Like that'd be kind of weird. Or like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, or like do you have Act 4? You can also play Act 1 or Act 4, or like you know like it's kind of just weird, right? And like. So like from that perspective, it's like, oh, we should do them all at once, like at some point. But then on the other hand, we're like, okay, if we don't release the acts one at a time, then that kind of means like all the content from that we're sort of busy having to work on, we still have to have good releases, right? And so that means we have to have like more stuff in what we do release if it doesn't contain an act. So there's kind of this like complicated like puzzle around this, and it's like, and what we kind of thought like. There are issues around this, but effectively we're like, okay, well, we're going to have to make Act 4. We have to be making Act 4 in the background right now anyway, right? So we don't technically have to decide what we're doing about this, like, right now. So, like, that's sort of happening anyway. So I guess that is to say that, like, there's still a lot of argument about this fact. And yeah, it's honestly such a hard one because I don't think there's a really great answer. Like releasing the acts one at a time would make making content so much easier because we get to immediately utilize all the stuff from that act to like make other content. Like it'll be so much, and like also it just immediately makes a release feel really big, right? So like that would be something that we could do, and it also would be good for our studio because like there's this phenomenon that always happens where like. You say, okay, this is when we're making this thing, but if people are not actually going to play it, then like people have a different definition of finished from like, oh, people are actually going to play this versus like it just has to be ready internally, you know. So like for just a production perspective, like I feel like the game will get made faster if we do release the acts, just because it forces us to actually release them and like forces everyone to get it into a really playable state. But yeah, on the other hand, as I said, there's like all these kind of like practical issues with it. So
damned if you do, damned if you don't, huh?
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a tough one. So
hard to decide between
I guess
campaign,
the answer to
the
that
thing that
is
people
still to
barely
come,
spend any
and
time
we just need to work out what we feel about this one or the other. So yeah, I guess you'll see when we do our next.
Yeah, it was my first thought too. Like endgame is high priority.
Yeah, as I said, in the meantime, it's not like we don't
have
to just make Act 4 anyway right now in the background.
People aren't going to be excited to go
they're
through it
continuing
again.
to do that as well as all the people on the more sort of balancey side of things working on balance.
They got a tough
which will get shipped
decision to make, but I feel like if they did just do one content drop, all the acts right at the end, then people wouldn't really complain about having to wait for it. They'd just be happy to have it. But if it's one at a time, it might really mess things up with always spending time on it being slow instead of just having it done and out of the way.
So what do you guys think about Magic Finance current states?
How much eggs were
This is a very tricky question. Now, what I will say to start with is that like the way the Magic Find formula works in PoE 2 is literally identical to how it was in PoE 1 as far as diminishing returns and everything is concerned.
You'd go through and do kind of like a cruel version of it with all different quests.
Is giving you
characters have changed. Like the story updated. It's like
in PoE 1.
How the world changed after your Axe
argument for why Magic Find should be found in PoE 2 is effectively like, we're not doing what happened in PoE 1 where you got like all these quantity mods.
Well,
and
I think
stuff
they
like that.
should only release
it's effectively
the full
Magic Find in PoE 2 is what PoE 1 had back when PoE 1 was first released, right? Where it was kind of like, and it kind of was fine then, so the argument was, why shouldn't it not be fine now?
We won't know the theory behind it. It'd be like a nice Easter egg when we do see it.
Compounding with this, there's another contingent of people who would say that like anything at all that affects item drops should just not be a thing at all, and which is like a position you can take, and I
but then they
don't
need
know
to
that
be
I
quick with the full
necessarily
release,
agree with that position, but like, you know, it's another position you can take. So I guess all of that really is to say that like I don't think there's anything about it that's not working as it's intended to work, and ultimately the purpose of something like Magic Find is to kind of give you another axis of build design beyond just like doing the most DPS, which, you know, like that's kind of its ultimate goal. So but I mean that's kind of where it's at really. There's definitely more to look into here,
Find as it is. That's weird.
Not really. I was just thinking the main difference between say PoE 1 was you fully saturate into every single item being a unique item.
That's the difference.
Whereas in PoE 2, you saturate into higher tier rares. You actually cannot fully saturate into unique items. It isn't possible. So yeah, it certainly holds different value. I don't know how, but then again, I suspect a lot of the audience who are finding Magic Find to be a problem would find it a problem in both games, which again, completely fair perspective to take.
I mean, complaining about Magic Find is, I don't know.
Like, we come back from holiday and we're like, all right,
it's like complaining about an artist which
there's this list of like,
I don't know, the art he does, you don't like,
what we think is the most
just
impactful
say, oh, I could do the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of these things that are just outlying on a list for us to really actually look into and investigate more and see, you know,
it's definitely their choice. It's their game to make as they like. I'm not a fan of it on gear. I like it on maps, waystones, the tree,
there'll be a lot of people who just disagree with that. He says it's fine, but there'll be a lot of people who disagree with him as well.
I'm not a fan of it, but I understand why they want it.
We just need to look into this a bit more honestly to get a better conclusion. But
I mean, it's the reason why I have a Magic Find setup and a bossing setup. It's just.
But I might change my mind as well upon reading all of this and looking into it more. So.
But
we'll see how it
that's
goes.
just being nitpicky.
I don't know if you. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, you have more reason to gamble then.
Sure. So a follow-up to this is okay. So the state of Magic Find is a question. Specifically, do you have a belief on how you believe it's influenced the economy? I'm seeing a lot of comments sometimes when I'm live. People like Magic Find's the reason, inflation's the thing, etc. So what is your guys' belief in terms of how much Magic Find is actually making an impact in the current economy?
Actually, there's another difference from PoE 1, actually, of course, is that Magic Find now increases the tiers of currency you find.
Yes.
Which,
I don't honestly think that we have an informed enough opinion on this topic, actually, to be fair. I don't think it's been our primary concern, like, this week, because of the fact that, like, there's other things that we think, you know, like, we really wanted to make sure that the actual play experience is prioritized as the main thing. Like, that's the kind of, you know, our focus right now. Which, I mean, obviously this affects it, but it's kind of like something where, like, it's a slightly longer term concern. So it's something we need to definitely investigate more. But yeah, it was really like that map playability and like making sure that, because like, I mean, when people are dying to things that they think are bullshit and stuff like that, that's kind of like something that we were more concerned about. So that's I would say we need to definitely do more. We need to form an opinion about this before we can say more about it, I think.
So basically, they have higher priorities than Magic Find, so Magic Find's going to stay.
Item quantity was removed, which affects
for now.
In PoE 2, you now bake that into
I see what you mean. Yep, that's a very good point.
What is the reasoning for reintroducing quantity that you made a decision to remove in PoE 1?
I don't think that we looked at that as reintroducing quantity, but you are correct that it does increase the quantity. Well, okay, it's not that it increases the quantity of currency; it increases the type, the tier of the currency you get, which you would look at that as quantity because, like, you don't care about like whatever transmutes are dropping. You only care about the higher ones, and so as far as you're concerned, that is quantity. So I would say we just didn't really look at that as quantity, but you know, you're not wrong about that, right? That is true.
Well, it's certainly going to be a problem if it is perceived as that having enough rarity is the only way to thus have enough currency to say roll your maps effectively and also have enough to spend on gear and whatnot. Like that's certainly a problem. In which case
There's
some
more than enough
adjustments
currency to roll your
probably
maps,
likely
so
do
that's
need to be
not an issue.
made. But again, we're just speculating now. We need to look into this a heck of a lot more in order to get an actual informed decision.
Just elks and regals.
That's fair. I do have one last follow-up on it, and it's a discussion we had 4 or 5 years ago with Chris Wilson, and the topic was actually about currency drop as well. And the comment was that the numbers were fine on GGG's side. The numbers look fine. It is accurate. You are dropping more currency than ever. But the numbers didn't matter when the perception in the community is the direct opposite. So how do you think about tackling that specific conversation?
You don't tackle that. You just wait to the market.
Opposite to what's seemingly the reality of things, right?
So are you saying that the community perception is that currency doesn't drop enough?
It's the perception is that rarity is a mandatory stat.
Oh, sure. No, yeah, well, absolutely, right? Like, look, if the community feels that way, we should absolutely look into it and do more about it, right? Like, but bear in mind that, yeah, I sort of often say, you know, like when the community has a problem, this is an invitation for us to understand the problem and then for us to address it in the way we want to address it. And that way isn't necessarily exactly what the community is saying, but it's just effectively like, I do want to keep doing things until the community is no longer unhappy about it. But that may not necessarily look exactly like in the form that they're expecting, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we have to look more into this. That's absolutely the case, right? And we can tell that because of the fact that people are unhappy. So yeah, we will look into more into it.
They will
so,
at least
speaking of unhappy,
so that probably means
we're going to
increasing
get
base
into
rates.
State of melee /
lowering
maces.
the scaling
is the next
ability.
portion of the questions here. So
maybe.
Let's talk about warrior and maces. What are your guys' feelings currently on the state of maces? How do you want mace skills in particular to function in Path of Exile 2? Obviously, they're very long cast times. Movement of mobs can be very quick. You can get stunned, interrupted. On the tree as well, there's many nodes that literally reduce like attack speed in order to gain other things. So more or less, warriors in a position where a lot of the people feel like it's clunky, too slow for the current in-gameplay loop, or warrior feels like maybe the first class designed when the vision of PoE 2 was fairly slow. So what is your guys' response as to the state of mace skills, and where would you like to take it?
Well, our first question I would have for you is, do you think it's a problem during campaign or only in endgame?
I would say it is more specifically a problem in an exponential ramping as you continue the game until you hit a point where there's pinnacle bosses, and then you can kind of one-shot pinnacle bosses with some of the setups currently. So there's a mid portion of the middle to later in-game in which it feels like a problem, specifically because you have things like volatiles that actually track you, and if you stay in position, you're heavily punished. So it seems counterintuitive to the design of some of the mobs.
I do think that there is a problem in game here. I'm not exactly sure what we need to do about it yet, though. I'm glad to hear you say that it's an in-game issue and not a campaign issue, because I have to say that my experience playing Warrior through campaign is actually that it's fine. But I did hear a bunch of people talking about that as if that was not fine, and I think that it is. Like, I think, or at least I can't reproduce the issue during campaign if that's the case. So really, it is more of an in-game issue, and I don't know that I've got a solution for you right now. But it's. We do need to, like, once again, it's one of those more subtle things that we need to look into, and I suspect that the big balance patch will be looking at that a lot more. There is something about the warrior that doesn't scale in the same way that some of the other classes do, I believe. But that we sort of need to understand what the other classes end up looking like as well a little bit to understand that as well. I don't know if you've got any more.
He's too
opinions
slow.
Well, I mean, the attack speed is
the warrior,
part of it, right?
That
is a multiplicative axis
terrible.
that every other
and all the perfect window abilities, they root you for so long. It's just
trigger speed that every other
Gathering
class
Storm
is getting,
kind of okay because it moves you afterwards,
has a deficiency in that, and even if you were to get it, yes, obviously there's the fixed attack times.
Perfect strike is probably the worst of it.
It's probably a combination of those are too punishing, or there's too much.
But I saw one
and
with
there's not
those
enough attack
screaming
speed
aura thing
available.
That looked fun.
It'll be somewhere in that region for sure, where we have to make some adjustments, and it probably won't even be that drastic to get it to feel right. And of course, like, it is easy to compare it to, especially, I know you said more like late mid to mid end game thing, but like when you look at the like top end, it's very easy to compare it to the absolute insanity that is, like, Pillar of the Cage God with Hoa and all of that, which is just ridiculous right now. It's very easy to compare it to that and be like, well, Warrior will never be viable. But there are also a lot of quite good end game warriors that are certainly being played, and You know, I don't want to certainly make it seem like
So we're
it's
getting
completely useless. And I mean
nerfed next season.
people using maces, not just people who are doing it for these tendencies.
Karn's a notable example. He's like level 99 in SSF, but he's having to use the Herald of Ice tech, which is very highly speculative to be nerfed, right, in order to make it feel good. So while I would agree there's people that are doing it, I would also argue there are people that are doing it as a masochist in order to be like, I'm a warrior guy and I need to do it regardless.
There are also others, maybe not that advanced and not that far up in terms of her level. But yeah, sure, understood. Like, it's certainly on the weaker end at the end game, like, without question. That being said, I don't think it will take too much to get it there. But yeah, again, it's part of this massive balance, you know, recalibration we didn't need to do now that we've seen the state of everything.
Right.
Warrior or mace skills are certainly on the ones where you're going to do a lot more bringing up than you're going to do bringing down. You know, aside from things like you know the Hammer of the Gods, just one shot with bleed and then the boss is dead and you don't do anything, right? You get those anomalies out there where it's like, yeah, they're going to die in one shot no matter what. You know, things like that aren't going to be buffed necessarily, but
fair enough.
There is more to buff in the mace spectrum than there is in most of the other things, I'd say, yes.
So that answers the offensive spectrum for the warrior. Now let's talk about the defensive. And one of the things in the reveal video was armor, for instance, is getting fixed and or buffed, I should say, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
I wouldn't. One of the reasons we didn't dwell on that too much is because I wouldn't want people to think that that's more of a change than it is. Like, we are doing a bit of a buff to armor, but it's not like the hugest deal. I think there is more we have to do. Like, there's more complicated stuff we have to do with armor, I think, to make it more interesting. But there's a lot of arguments about this. One, because it is like, yeah, I'll just say that there's a lot of arguments about like how exactly this should be addressed. One concern that we have, which is probably totally out of left field as far as what the players would say, is that we don't think that there's enough of a difference between the big hit and the small hit. There's a number in the formula that is different in PoE 1 than it is in PoE 2 that results in the armor being... The difference between a small hit and a big hit in PoE 2 and PoE 1, it matters more in PoE 1. But in addition to that, so we actually think that PoE 2 might be wrong in this regard and we need to change it. But in addition to that, there's also a thing that's happened where like white monsters can hit harder in PoE 1 and PoE 2 than they did in PoE 1, and that means that the thing that armor is supposed to like, because like part of the intention with armor is it's like, okay, like when you're talking about like big boss hits, like it has less of an effect than what it would have off like a bunch of small hits, but sometimes the small hits from a white mob are not even that different from what a boss hits you with, and so this is actually meaning that the sort of the idea of armor being based on the damage hit has kind of got like a few issues that we have to deal with. So I don't know if you've got any more thoughts on this particular topic, but it is like something that we have to sort of worry about a little bit.
Yeah. It's again one of these things I mean, I hate coming in here so unequipped, but again, it's just the timing with the holiday and all that, with all these things where it's like, have to look into, but that is the nature of it. I mean, especially once there's an actual released product, it's like a good, 50% of our time goes into having to investigate and look into live operations problems like this.
So we are buffing a little bit of armor a little bit at the very start, but now they're saying that they don't even know how to fix it yet.
Honestly, the full solution for armor is going to have to be more complicated, and we're going to have to sort of work out some stuff around it.
Was weird.
There's definitely something. I think there was another thing as well, is that like the other defenses tend to have like extra mechanics that are easier to access than what armor has. Which is another sort of side thing, which is like not entirely obvious when you're designing it initially. So it might be that there's more like supplementary things that the armor, like the strength characters effectively need to have around defense. And so like stuff like that can kind of matter a lot. So
like Wind Dancer's universally just better.
Yeah, I think they're gonna patch it gradually.
Scavenge plating as an example, if those are meant to be paired. One is just like you have it, and the other is I have to armor break, and then on bosses it's much harder to sustain. So we've made changes there, of course. We did buff the armor. I'd say it's obviously hard because of the big hit, small hit, but it's probably in the like 15% more effective kind of region. Our changes in 011.
If it's only 15% better, that's not going to be enough.
Yeah, a lot of it is also like, okay, if you consider, that evasion also applies to damage mitigation from Invoker. You got a lot of things going on with acrobatics, which turns evasion into arguably, I mean, sure, it penalizes your evasion, but like it then kind of gives you almost as much PDR against certain hits as a lot of armor, and then you have a lot of very, very strong defensive, with Grim Feast and Energy Shield. And so, like, it's not only armor is weak, it's also that evasion and Energy Shield have some extreme strongs that are going on. Not to say, these are all going to be nerfed. I'm just saying there's some meeting in the middle that we need to do for sure.
Because evasion and Energy Shield just feel good.
I played Warrior 9
Yeah,
first.
it's not too strong.
Like Grim Feast is obviously really powerful. They can bring the spirit cost, that's no problem. Same thing with Wind Dancer, but armor just needs to be brought up, that's the big thing. Because we're still getting nuked by the mobs, even white mobs.
And it has basically the worst offensive capabilities as well. So you can see why I'm feedbacking so hard in relation to this archetype.
Man, that's a brutal savaging, but I suppose I can't necessarily disagree with any of those with any of those assessments.
Fair enough. We can move on to the next topic
so
then, unless you have other statements on it.
Oh, what do they have?
You have shields.
Yeah. You are right that it effectively falls in that way. Yeah. Let's just sure. Yep.
Okay. So moving forward here, we have charms. So I saw that there were some notable changes in relation to charms. I thought it was a great change to be able to see when they're actually being activated, as well as the charms that are there as well. So some clarity things in relation to charm. I don't know if I saw whether or not charms in particular are actually getting tweaked in terms of number side of things, or if it was just some transparency related to charms. But how do you guys feel about?
We're not tweaking numbers in this patch. However, there's definitely something not right about charms as far as like the usefulness goes and all that sort of stuff. Like we need to do something. I don't think we've decided what it is yet, but it's clear to us at this point. Like, so charms came in like super late, and I just don't think they're quite like working out as well as I'd hoped. Like they just need something else, but we don't quite know what that will be yet. But we did want to at least make, like, one of the issues they did have is like you couldn't even tell when they helped you. So that certainly wasn't helping the case for them. So we could at least
the
fix
more
that.
they talk, the less hyped
there
I
probably
get.
does need to be more stuff
I
done.
know, like the intro video was amazing.
I think it comes down a little bit to like how much the ailments matter.
And now it's like they're
against the
backpedaling
player
in the worst ways.
And that's sort of something that
there's a few other ones. Like there's the one that's like unaffected. The next time you get slowed, protect you from slows. And honestly, a lot of the debuffs applied by monsters haven't been correctly classified as slows, and so it doesn't even work against them. And like there's a little bit of things like that where
I wasn't
it's
aware
like,
of that one.
yeah, it's just kind of a bit bad. But yeah, there's a balance there of like, okay, most people have one slot, and then you got these mandatory mods to get more. But I don't
think you get enough charm slots. Just like I feel like you barely find belts with the extra slots, to be honest.
I agree.
I mean, we really just didn't finish.
How many hours
we increased
do
the
I
weightings.
have?
We've had patched that in since release.
lot,
Yeah,
I
so
200.
can't remember what
210.
patch it was
I
in,
never
but,
found.
Honestly, we're
slot.
not all the way there yet, for sure.
I've found
it's one of those
two
things where it's not like
belts.
ruining
I got,
experience for players.
I
At
don't
least
even know
it's
how
like
many.
just an underwhelming thing that needs some love for sure.
But
so it's not exactly number in the top 10
are
of the
very
hit list.
rare.
But,
I've had a bunch of one slot.
Like without a doubt,
like
I would expect to see improvements around there in the future.
Okay.
Following up on the charms there, any thoughts regarding adding more charm slots for uniques? Because it feels really hindering.
But I used one for a while, and it really didn't add much. Because the Sun Charm didn't do anything.
So this is the whole idea. If you have a unique belt,
like the only one that really does anything is the Thawing Charm for freezes. And
I also just want to add more slots outside of unique, so more in the tree and other ways to get them as well. So you don't necessarily have to, because like there's nothing. I think at the time we had it that like you couldn't have more than 3. Like internally it was implemented that way, and now it's like you could have 50 slots, plus 1 slots, but you'd only have 3, obviously. So we can give away a lot more +1 now and plus whatever we want all over the place. But yeah, I mean that is a way, yes, that some unique should have it, and probably more on the tree, more in other ways. I have to have a look at it, but yeah, there's no harm in it now, at least.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna move over to another topic, which is speaking of belts and trading the unique belts, for example. State of crafting and future plans is also involved. So I'm going to start with crafting and future plans you have there, and then we'll talk about trade. So the current state of crafting is very different from PoE 1. The perception, again, to go back on that in PoE 2 is that you're not actually crafting unless it's Rogpog crafting. You're actually just pulling the arm on the vendor machine, on the gambling machines. So what's the state here and future plans?
I don't know that there's a huge amount we can say about this right now. Unless you've got any particular thoughts that you think you can go into. I mean, like one thing, of course, is that PoE 2 just has less crafting systems than PoE 1, just due to the fact that we add these typically with leagues and so on. So there's just less going on, which means that if you're like a PoE 1 player, then you're going to see less complexity there, for sure. But I don't think that's exactly what you're getting at, right? Like, I guess there's some theory. I mean, effectively what you're saying is people want more determinism, right? Which is like a continuous, endless thing that like people.
There's a fine line there,
Yeah.
and we're on the certainly more on the slot machine side of that line, like without a doubt, obviously, right? And there's more we need to do, I would say, to get towards that line. But that's our line that we determine. Not that I know how to describe that, because there's plenty of people who are just going to be like make everything fully deterministic all the way.
I mean, before we released, we had for a while a system that involved like deconstructing mods and then putting specific mods on items and so on. And like we just kind of like no one, like with a system like that, we were never able to get it to the point where both people who played the game were happy and like we could be happy as far as like what it would let you do.
Deterministic crafting and things like the Recombinator bench was.
There's still something along those lines we might be able to do one day to kind of work that out.
Bring that back because you can make some pretty incredible gear.
Socketables were kind of supposed to be the thing that was you had full control over. It's like determinism,
time and effort,
and so that like
what kind of thing you need, you will build it eventually.
Sure. So there's more stuff you can do there, but I guess people because people see that as supplementary, they don't even necessarily see it as part of the crafting system, which is kind of interesting.
I remember it from Diablo 3, right? When you can just
the crafting system in a way, but then as I said, people don't
get
see it as part
one
of it,
ability of an item and then change that specifically into random, right?
Oh yeah, that was a great system that they had in place.
Yeah. I guess the thing is, you just have to find a way to do more things that make people
all those currencies which
sacrificing
roll something randomly on that item can totally destroy it, and I hate it.
Which is obviously always the concern, like making sure that there's still enough room for there to be items that are significant.
Had one armor super destroyed.
So I mean, yeah, that's kind
it
of
was
where
awesome.
At,
oh my god.
The other thing, of course, being it is important that to make sure as we add more of this determinism or get towards that line, that we don't then just immediately devalue all item drops on the ground, right? Because that creates a different problem when now all of a sudden you don't really care about what you're finding, or you're only caring about normal items you're finding, or you create a different problem by doing that for sure.
And there is an argument certainly by people internally that PoE 1 got to the point of that being a problem, where you no longer cared so much about what was on the ground because you crafting would always get you something better. Yeah, like that is a concern for sure. But yeah, I guess that's kind of just our overall, just like nebulous cloud of thoughts on this matter, without really getting into too many specifics, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I guess
I don't know if you've got anything else to say about it.
If we add more, we're adding something to Expedition, which is sad because necessarily or what it will do to the thing, and then we're adding, what I would say, greater essences are too rare right now, and what else is there in there? I guess like there's certainly room to expand on the Omen system to do more there. Of course, people would argue then they don't want that to be the core crafting system to be gated behind ritual as opposed to core drop, which is then another consideration to make. And you get this cascading series of questions and stuff we need to answer, of which need to think about it more and look more. But yeah, certainly there is the feedback of like, the crafting is too slot machiney, is something we're listening to and we have seen, and it is, I'd say that is more towards our top 10 list of things to discuss and solve sooner than later.
Right.
I think that deterministic crafting is always something that's very sought after and popular, but I feel like I might be out of terms here, but my own personal perspective, I'll say that, is not the lack of deterministic crafting per se, it's lack of options to craft with, because the slot machine crafting, we have that in PoE 1 as well. It's called Exalted, it's divining, and whatever we're doing with the items.
Harvest.
It's not deterministic crafting. Yeah, exactly, harvest. It's not deterministic crafting that's lacking. It is options to do something with the actual items, because right now you drop an item and what you can do is annul it or exalt it, or you can pop some chaos orbs. And the meta crafts, which are behind the omens, that's a different topic.
He's right.
Which we're going to tackle in a bit here. We talk about trading. But the crafting has less to do with deterministic approaches, but rather giving us options to work with on an item to make us actually craft it, even if that means RNG in the next slam or something.
Right.
Yeah, because
and if that's the case, then more content.
need to exalt and it sucks.
That will just be that will
then you
solve itself
chaos
over
and lose
time.
the one
right.
good
Because
mod
as we
is
just had more
straight
stuff
dead
during early
and
access,
you
there's
destroy
just going to
it.
be more and
You
more
can't
of those
start
kind of,
over.
crazy systems.
But we'll make sure that, like, I say over time, it's not like there's something inevitable about it for sure. But because it is a bigger problem now, we would make sure that we try and ensure that as we're adding more content, it is leaning towards
I think it will come.
adding more
I think
options
the
there and
community
solving
wants it,
these
so
problems that
they
people
will
have,
put it
as
in.
opposed to just like,
Yeah, we want it
I will do
bad.
something cool and maybe it does and maybe it doesn't.
Crafting is a beautiful,
we'll have a lot
beautiful
more,
concept, and they really need it.
problem solving, designing, content created by more towards solving the problems as opposed to
the number for
when you're
songworthy
at a point
deeds
where you have
doesn't
so
really
much
matter. It's
content a
just
lot of
random.
the time, you can be like, what are we
It
going to do? Let's just make
determines
something cool and
what
awesome.
skills will come up, but
whereas here it's going to be like, let's look at
we don't have
problems
a
to
way yet
solve and
to
create
check it.
content that comes from that. So there's like kind of two ways of coming up with
just
the
get a
content,
Verona.
and certainly this is one that will be a problem that we're looking to try and solve by doing that for sure.
That's fair. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but following up to the state of trading, I mean, obviously we have trading being in its state that it is, but there's the volatility problem of the market's economy being player-based. For now, we have a golden standard of trading divine orbs, which quite literally holds close to zero value in terms of actual player usage outside of a handful of specific unique items, and is representative of trade power in the community. And since there is no natural divine orb sink, which exalted orbs have, for example, they just continue going up, and the inflation is just rampant at this point.
So, I would have thought that if there was no divine orb sink, then the value of divines would go down rather than up. Like, presumably, if the value of divines is going up in other currency, then it's the other currency that there's too much of rather than the divines.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, like, they become the golden standard, and since no one's using them, we get a higher quantity of them. And the result of it is that now, since that is the item people are using, or the currency people are pricing their items off, they're now, one rare, one life pair of boots with 10% movement speed now costs 50 divines, if I'm going to use some exaggerated examples.
Okay, so you're talking about the price in divines is going up as opposed to the price
of a divine is
the value of a divine is going
the
up. Okay,
item value, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, there's nothing I can kind of initially go into with this other than just that, like, yeah, we just have to look at this and work out what we're going to use to sync these things more.
God, I hope someone
the
does some
intention
checklist on GTG right now.
with divines is that you
They have so much to look
like, if
into.
there's enough,
Yeah, and they're
like things where you want to reroll mod values on,
not
which,
matching what they said in that
like,
intro video.
is uniques ideally. Like, the implication of that is that there aren't the uniques that people are wanting to roll to get good values on, right? I mean, I'm assuming that's the reason.
Some not enough. Yeah. Well,
Maybe
I mean, we don't have enough unique items.
For sure,
like,
for sure.
we need a lot more.
We
which
do,
is another goal we have, of course. But I mean, so yes, there's not enough uniques, let alone enough uniques to be using divine orbs for
and of course the thing in PoE 1 where things were priced and that currency can help, but we don't have anything quite like that, I suppose. I mean, look, if that's a problem, we'll just like find a way to sync them, I suppose. But ideally, ideally, if everything's working correctly, they'd be syncing themselves due to the fact that there's enough things you want to reroll values on, and like uniques that you want to reroll values on. I'm actually curious to know whether people are even really bothering with that. Like, are people actually bothering to reroll unique values?
I guess some, but not many.
Right, not many.
Not many.
Astramentus.
Yeah,
those are like the two main ones, I think. Like, no one's gonna pop a divine orb on a Venter's Gamble, so it's like that's literally gambling. But like in PoE 1, we have the option of metacrafting being a currency sink for divine orbs. Former exalted. So it creates this natural flow, but also provides this crafting method for people to actually kind of help the state of crafting that people are looking for. Right now, they're omens, and because of this type of inflation happening, they are so far away from most players that, like, even players that play a lot, I haven't bothered myself. I played a lot with a subathon and everything. Like, I haven't touched an omen because they're too pricey to use.
It's like 8 divines to use one omen.
Players that even engage with them because of how priced they are, and that just separates a lot of crafting from even a larger player base.
One other point of this is it might tie into a previous discussion we had about Magic Find influencing the economy in relation to currency drops being upgraded. So I know that's one portion we talked about you're going to look at previously too. So I think these two probably tie in together here.
I don't know that I've got anything particularly like smart to say about this right now, honestly. Though that would be the
Well, we
issue.
are at least making
Surprised we're
more
not
common,
focusing
so
more on
hopefully-
just
Yes,
gameplay
that's
things.
true.
I
But I
think
mean,
that
to
they
some
actually want to
But
change.
I think we then also need more uniques and a lot more uniques, obviously.
Sorry,
and a
come
lot
again?
more uniques
Like,
that would
Mark
have
and
divine
John,
syncs,
what
and
they
then
want
I
to do
suspect the answer
is
also
talk
is
about the game
additional syncs of
itself, not about
currency.
the market systems, because
Yeah.
market system is
Yeah,
player
I
driven.
mean, I suspect it's a bit of
Yeah.
everything here.
Okay.
I mean,
so
yeah,
we'll
they
move
have
on
to
here.
think about it,
we
but it's
have
not
a
where they're
significant amount of
focusing.
questions left. So I'm gonna
The
try
market
to
needs to
speed up the
evolve and
cadence
get to
of
a
these
certain
little bit
standard.
here as we're about.
You know,
maybe
that'll
halfway
happen in
through, but-
time.
Well, over halfway.
But
through.
Yeah,
this is
it's
still
still
early
so
access.
vague.
We're
Yeah,
gonna talk
yeah,
a little bit about state of in-game and state of league mechanics here. So I'm specifically going to go
There
into
you go,
league
this is more-
mechanics first here.
More in their
So
wheelhouse.
some league mechanics, essences, strongbox, to name a few, feel a little bit like noob traps. So I was kind of hoping to hear where your guys' thoughts are in relation to some of the underutilized ones. We talked about Expedition already, so you don't necessarily have to go into it, as well as the state of Breach. Breach feels notably like the one people are enjoying the most. Do you
Also,
feel like that
please,
was overtuned?
respecing
The other one, I mean, I
for
don't know
no
anyone who
money.
actually does strong
That would
boxes.
be
So
awesome.
where do you
Oh
want
my God.
those and essences in particular, especially when it comes to the
I don't really get
often
it.
essences
They brought it down
are
once,
not
but I'm
really
still
rolling
spending
greater
like
essences. Like, you don't really
8,000
see
gold
greater
for a
essences very
point.
often. I actually saw more in the campaign that
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
even have enough money
So
to
I'm
respec yet, and
curious
it
about
annoys
kind of
me
league
so
mechanics
much.
as it ties into in-game.
Because
in
I spent
particular.
$1 million, as I told you,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, look, we just need
Yeah.
to do a lot of balance here, and that's really all it is. And that once again just comes down to the relative lack of
It
testing that
ramps up
in-game had
fast.
before launch compared to
It ramps
other
up
content.
really
So yeah, there's
fast.
just a lot of balance to do here.
It was meant to be more that essences,
I haven't really
strong
had that problem
boxes,
too
and, like,
much just because I
precursor
got
artifacts are
so
like
much
the
gold, but
things you find that you can't anticipate.
Yeah, and I
coming.
mean, you found
understand
your
can
build, right?
Spec into
Yeah.
them. That is a thing.
Yeah.
But it's meant to be
I do
more
a
like
lot
a
of
thing you
tweaking
find
and a
that you
lot
don't
of
know
messing
is
around.
coming, whereas
but
Yeah.
at the
I know
same
we
time,
refer to
I
them all as
have
leagues,
spent
but like let's say
multiple
the virtual
millions in
expeditions, they're the
respecting
ones
just
you,
for testing
you
things.
know are coming and that you're investing into. So you have these
It
two
gets pricey
categories where you have the
really
ones you
fast.
are adding and investing
Just keep
into,
it
and then
for
you have the
free,
other ones that
though.
are meant to be more
Even
exciting random
for
finds.
full release. I don't see any
And
point in
it's safe to say, obviously,
having
you
to
know,
pay
there are
for
so
it.
many essences that
If they
finding
keep it
non-greater
with
essences isn't giving you that
with
dopamine.
Doriani, I
especially
think that would
in
be
in-game.
fine.
And
What they
finding a
don't
strong
want
box is
is
like
respecing
anti-dopamine right now.
for the
It just
map
makes you
and
feel
go
bad
back and
because you're like,
then
oh,
True.
do a
this,
new
and you
passive
just want to run
tree for
away.
a
So,
boss and stuff.
look,
that
it's
would
safe
be
to
a
say that
problem.
those failed
Yeah,
at
true.
achieving that goal. Hence, why we have to make some improvements to them for sure. But I want to make sure that there's those two layers of things where one's the things stuff you predict is coming. You can see the icons. You can apply them with the you know, there's the base types of the precursor tablets to apply, and then you have the things where it's like, I hope I find an essence because it's like, I hope I get the good one that's worth, you know, way too many of those divine orbs. So yeah, having both layers is important. So yeah, and we'll continue to add ones at that upper level that get a tablet, and then we'll continue to add ones that are more at that random find excitement in the map that you don't know is coming. Because you don't want to put it all on one layer where you know everything that's coming necessarily, because then nothing is exciting. And you can do exciting within that to some degree, but not always.
I mean, really, it all is to say that like there are some of these that just aren't as good as the others, and we just have to improve them. But
Yeah,
what I
improve
will say
chance
is that
orbs.
the breach monster density is probably a little on
man.
the high side. Like it's actually to the point, by the
I've
way,
used so many
where,
dozens trying to get anything.
like we get a
I
bunch of
haven't
error
hit a
Oh my
messages
single
on
God.
bots that
yet.
are failing to spawn monsters in breach because this
So
pack's so
people are
tightly
getting
together that they
Astromentus
don't
with
even spawn
theirs.
anymore. So there's
It's on
actually
those
like
stellar
there's an issue
amulets,
there,
right?
Yeah,
that we have to do
exactly.
something
Yeah, yeah.
about. Even.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Like
So
actual hundreds of error logs of just like cannot fail to place monster due to lack of space.
yeah. So like that there was a joke if we could release breach monster reduce breach monster density by 20% and the players wouldn't even see it because it would just result in less error messages for us. So you know, like there are actually some stuff that needs to be sorted out there. But we don't want like what I don't want is people to feel like, oh, we're just like nerfing that into the ground or something like that. We definitely don't want to do that. But some of the other league mechanics just need some addressing to make them as better. And yeah, they just need to be better. And yeah, it'll all just come down to us like experiencing them and seeing if they suck, we'll improve them. And like right now, I know that Strongbox has got the most improvement in this patch, and I know Essence has got like at least some adjustment to make them a little bit less crap. and there's probably a few more adjustments.
It's more about the combat than the itemization. That's something we still need to look into.
Right. So there's just stuff like, we just need to improve all that stuff until it's good, right? Simple as that, really.
Fair enough. How do you guys feel about the progression of players entering into mapping, going from map tier 1 to you're doing tier 16s, and then into Pinnacle bossing? How do you feel like the pacing in there? They give you, one reason I bring it up is in PoE 1, we have like the quest invite version of boss fights that will happen at different iterations, so you probably know where I'm going with this.
So we're not really happy with how that is right now. We're not happy with how the quests. The quests that effectively we give you are just like do X many of tier Y maps. And honestly, like
really,
you think
so?
The Pinnacle Bosses
that's kind of a larger. It's something that I would have loved to be able to just solve instantly, but like it does need some more work.
Pinnacle
so one of them
is
that like just the way the progression feels.
And even going from like
good as
rank
PoE 1 in some
3
way,
on
it's kind of
the
slightly
Sanctum
hard
to
to
rank
define.
4.
Like in terms of just like the feeling of like the progress you're making just isn't quite right.
Wild.
So I think we need to do more. Like there might be some changes we have to make to how the Atlas works
or the
to
Chaos
make that
trials.
better.
Certainly want
And
some
then
bosses
when I got
between
to
those
the trial master for the
like
first
it
time,
just needs more of a
it was like a
random ones,
15-minute fight where I didn't have enough mana to
still
do
along
anything.
a series of objective-driven
I was
kind of
bashing
narrative
them with my basic
involved
abilities.
things where you're getting your. It's still an end game, not
now.
Pinnacle
Obviously, I can
boss
pop
at tier
in
6
like a second,
and maybe at tier 11, and
when I needed that
the
fourth
quest
ascendancy is
versions, and you're doing
ridiculous.
those, and then maybe there's Uber versions, and I'm just rambling.
There just needs to be more going on with regard to how that progression feels. So that's one element. So the next one is that the tutorialization of the end game is not really there. Like we need to do more around this so that like it actually sort of eases you into end game a little bit better. As far as like if you're a new player, like we kind of just throw you in the deep. Like we fixed a lot of things about the introduction to the game through the campaign, but then you get to end game and it's kind of like we don't really do enough to kind of really ease you in there, I would say. And then I did have a third point, but I can't remember what it was now. There was something about that. Oh yeah, that's right. And it sort of ties in a little bit to what I was. This kind of was covered a little bit with what Mark was saying just a second ago, but like the way
I don't think you need any tutorials
you can
like for the end game.
Too quickly, and then you kind of get left behind.
You've already
with, like,
learned if you got
what
through
you
the
should be
campaign.
getting, and like in order for us to fix that, we kind of have to make
either
each tier
that
more
or
meaningful
you
with
just
regards to what you have to do there and what's going
look
on. So
what the community has to offer, like
at in-game, just to kind of make it
tutorials,
feel like more of a
YouTube
progression
videos,
and
whatever, on
more
a specific topic you want to know.
And that can include more storyline elements and more things like that. There just needs to be more, basically, just there to make that.
But I mean, I'm a huge Souls fan, and
the game does take
maybe
a bit of a turn
I
suddenly
like it
when you
that
get to
way.
in-game of like it doesn't really feel.
You're
like
willing to do the deep
It really
dive.
does feel very different.
A lot of people aren't. A lot of people they
campaign
want
to
it just
in-game.
handed to them in a 30-second
It's
format.
just a matter of sort of easing that
And if
transition,
it's
making
not
that a little
like
bit
that,
better
they
and
just move
smoothing
on.
out that more for sure.
I want to hone into 2 points here. Because you talk about it feels like a different game, sort of a different sense of progression, at least. As you go from campaign into action. This is a question we're going to ask later, but it seems a good time to ask it now. Is that intended, and do you like that as a design principle? Because I've seen people say that they really like the campaign, and me myself, I like the difference, but I've seen people state that they really enjoy the campaign pacing, then they get to maps and they feel like it starts blasting, it's almost a different game at that point. So I think the audience would love to know how you feel about that difference.
I do actually, I mean, you do need to get to the point at some point where you feel incredibly powerful. However, I would say that there is like a bit of a switch flip right now that's kind of not quite right. Like there's definitely something that ain't right going on there.
Well, there's two. There is the character power side. I mean, a lot of people are getting to endgame. Excuse me. A lot of people are getting to endgame and they aren't just becoming gods all of a sudden, right? A lot of people are struggling and falling off and can't sustain maps and are dying. And it's not like you get to endgame and all of a sudden you're ultra powerful. But
a lot of
people are getting to endgame and then are just lost as to what to do. Right, like a lot of players really like to be told exactly.
Like having resistances all the time when you're getting your item and stuff.
And something just like complete 10 tier 1 maps is not a fun objective, right? That's just like, okay, sure, I'll do that.
But better.
Where we could do that a lot better, right? Go to this place, travel here, do this exact thing, discover this, do a tower, run this breach, all these things.
I mean, get rid of
way better objectives and ones that
magic find and put in another chance for resistance
for each, and you're like, okay, the next thing it wants me to do is this exact thing, not just I've completed my 10. Oh, now it just wants me to complete tier 2 maps. I see. I'll just keep going. Sure. So there's no like. Whereas the campaign's very story is like go kill this boss, get here, and you got NPCs talking to you and everything, and then all of a sudden it's just now I'm killing stuff, ticking up this ticker, and a lot of people probably aren't really getting into based on the tutorialization. They're not really getting into the towers, the tablets, all of that stuff, and then they're just also possibly finding it a bit too hard, and they're dying, and so it's not as friendly to the people who, especially non-PoE 1 players, it's not as friendly to them as we would want it to be at all. That being said, like, obviously, there is also the capacity at that point to just be like, all right, I'm going to change my build to do this or go do this, and now I'm just, like, obliterating everything everywhere. And you don't have all those, like, story events breaking up your flow of gameplay. It's just, like, map, kill everything, map, kill everything, map, kill everything, which people love. But yes, for those who know how to do that, that happens too soon. And for those who don't know how to do it, they're like getting stuck in a hole and finding themselves very lost. So yeah, 2 sets of improvements. The people that are going to obliterate everything, they're going to have their fun no matter what. They'll get there a bit later, sure, if that's how you want to think about it. But it's way more important to not just have that like very much narrative driven change in pace where all of a sudden it's just like, and it's gone. And now you're just doing, you know, kind of random stuff. You know, what am I supposed to do next kind of thing? And yeah. So yeah, there's a lot going wrong there. More content would do it, more time on it, more quests, more, you know. But again, PoE 1 had a lot of this stuff, and it had so many different axes. If you didn't like one thing, you could do another. If you didn't like that, you could do another, and you could do certain things earlier or later. And we just need to get to that point where there's just more better, without overcomplicating everything.
So my last follow-up to this in-game topic, and I'll send over the guys to continue the conversation elsewhere. So you mentioned that there's a little bit of a separation from what I'm hearing about people that like know how to blast, like they're going to go anyway, right? They're going to crush through and destroy it. Then you have the people that are like kind of learning the game, getting into the end game that might like get stuck and lost. How do you feel about the, you know, one pour though? Then now that the game has been out of the wild, does the one pour though feel like it's widening that gap and punishing players who maybe are learning the game too much? But it's the people who are going to blast regardless. It doesn't matter because they're not going to be dying consistently in maps. So how do you feel about one pour though state of mapping currently, as well as XP loss still being fairly significant, even though in the previous interview was stated that you don't feel like you need to have the XP loss as much, considering you do have that one pour though difference.
And with how rough XP gain is right now.
Oh my god.
So first of all,
95 to 96 felt like 99 to 100 in PoE.
We did discuss quite a lot about whether or not we want to go back on one portal or not.
It's not only that, it's also
it comes down
to
the
sometimes
fact
you
that
randomly die due to effects on that, right?
I think that
and then you lose
just would really
bunch
not feel the same if we
XP,
like
sucks.
the whole death actually mattering thing. I think is actually important. Like I think we sort of decided like we discussed what we were talking about the Pinnacle Boss thing. Obviously, the discussion came up of like, okay, should we just be allowing portals everywhere? Should we be allowing checkpoints everywhere? And I think we ultimately decided like we really don't want to go that way.
I mean, like Sanctum enemies will just run
to you. This Pinnacle stuff would like make sure that that's
no. I mean, like there's a rare that's glitching halfway through the floor and can attack you, but you can't attack it.
So it matters a lot more. Like the amount of time it takes you to get there, everything that matters.
But I think if 3 times
like to me, I feel like
that's crazy.
To be a game, you have to have some level of failure being.
There is always a rare
possible, and the 6 portal
so
thing.
You can't complete the map.
Is it always on the same map
it really
type?
Just does,
no.
To me, it just never really led to a situation where you felt like you really could fail in the same way. So yeah, I'm not really a fan. I much prefer the whole like one death thing.
Alright.
So maybe it's just the Val mod because it's the guy with the 2 bows
part of
for
the
arms.
Thinking around that is that like it's kind of keeping you in the place where you're supposed to be, as far as like, you know, if you're dying all the time, then you're probably not ready to keep going up the power curve. But I mean, maybe that's like the wrong way to look at it. I'm not sure. I don't know if you've got any different thoughts about this.
If you're dying, right now there's too many penalty axes. So if you are dying all the time, you're not going to get maps, and thus you're not going to go anywhere. And you also it's kind of like an add insult to injury. You're also now just not leveling. So
but you do have to have it. So
I agree. I think there's a few axes, and I think they're just a bit too severe when all combined together. Combined with, I also think that the very start of maps is just too difficult. Like I think we should ease into that a little bit. So bring that down a bit, and then ramp the difficulty up. Well, I mean, we could hit the same spot, but I think it's just a little bit, and I think that's mostly due to the number of rare monsters and the obviously monster combinations. Because you can kind of avoid bosses, and like I don't mind. I think that's a little bit of a different situation, but you get all these monsters you haven't seen in ages, and they all combine together, and so you have to kind of like generally when you go into those areas, you learn what the monsters are doing and how they're combining, and then you maybe die once or twice if you're not, you know, ultra powerful. And then you get into maps, and you're immediately sprung on like heaps of different monster permutations, and they're doing things, and you're getting killed all the time, and there's a lot to learn. You do the next map, and you're like, well, I can't take the learnings of that previous map and apply it to this next map because it's a whole different set of monsters. So there's nothing to really take from one map to another, aside from just like maybe playing a bit more carefully, or like, you know, not being so overzealous and whatnot. So it's just a little bit difficult there, and I suspect we need to bring down the difficulty a little bit and ease people into it a bit more. But I need to think about it certainly a lot more and actually get a little bit more analytics on it as well, and actually see what the actual problems are. And again, I read a lot more feedback, honestly.
Sure.
It would be nice if there was a way to deal with the fact that, so I mean, like, okay, the penalty for not clearing a map,
30 portals? No.
we remove the extra content from the map, and it would be nice if you could just spend another map and still be able to do that content. But unfortunately, that isn't possible. Like, so for example, you know, if you failed on the boss, then you just spend another map and then you can fight the boss again and do that whole thing, right? Like, that would be nice if that was the case. But unfortunately, we can't do that because it would open up too many economic abuse things where, like, you fail the map intentionally because you want to farm the items to the rest of the area. So it's very difficult for us to come up with a solution, like, because I really would prefer that, honestly. It'd be nice if we were able to come up with a solution that would allow you to redo content by spending an extra map without having to, like, have all the problems that being able to rerun a single map would actually cause. So yeah, like, I sort of wish I could come up with a thing for that.
I personally want to keep the one portal and adjust the other axes and see how that plays out.
Please don't keep the one portal.
Before compromising on the one portal. But yeah, it's a bit tricky. It certainly is the case. We have discussed this so many times.
I guess he needs to play the game more.
Sure.
It's come up, and before we released it, it's like people are going to definitely complain about this, and we're like, we know, and we haven't found the solution.
It's a common question. Had to ask.
Yeah.
Maybe have your portals.
So now there's a lot more people. Well, now there's a lot more feedback and a lot more people. It's much easier for us to get the specifics on how we could get it right, like, for sure. Not to say it's now trivial to do. It's still hard. But there's a lot more information there for us to be able to, you know, take less of a shot in the dark, so to speak. So I would expect some changes.
That's an unfortunate take they have on it. See. They're kind of sticking with it pretty hard.
So we're cutting it a little bit tighter because we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to try to speed run as much as we can, because there is a section that I care very much about. It's minions. So let's get there, okay? Let's just dive into it. We're going to talk about ailments, damage with time effects. We're talking about ignite. We're talking about dots like poison, for example. So the question is, what's your feelings around it on a hit, as it scales on hit, opposed to its dot scaling, which we have a bit different scaling in PoE 1, because now it's based off the actual hit you're doing, which was taken away from PoE 1. So what's the reasoning behind this, and what's your thoughts on it?
Now that one.
Well, I can't remember the history of PoE 1 too much, but I understand the difference. I mean, I personally prefer that the heavier the hit, the more the dot. The issue we run into is, of course, then you just get... It's either balanced around the extremely hard heavy hitters, and everything else can't really scale them currently.
That's how it is right now.
And then you get into the thing, or you go down the PoE 1 route where it's a bunch of skills have ailment penalties and a bunch of them don't, and that more normalizes it so you can play any skill to do the dots. I would say I prefer the asymmetry, where it's like, here are the skills that are generally better. The problem is, I'd say that's, you know, again, I mentioned the bleed Hammer of the Gods thing earlier, where it's just now the bleed one-shots the monster, and, you know, you get into that kind of situation. So there's a whole bunch of balance here to get right, but I don't want it to just be like, well, implicitly, I don't want it to be like you can play any build and bleed. You should have to have some combinations, and there's more mechanics and more things we need to add, or more unique items and all of that stuff.
Versus can do big damage, is like a 1600
It's tricky because, generally speaking, when we're doing first pass balance things, I really like to avoid... I like the bumpiness where we've got, like, different skills being better at different things. And I really don't like it when we end up in a situation like, for example, in... You know, you've got the whole, like, damage effectiveness on spells in PoE 1, and it's like, this is a thing you do to solve a balance problem. Like, this is unrelated to ailments, but, like, I'm saying it's just another example of one of those things where you're like, oh, I've got this problem where these skills are sort of all out of line with each other, and so we have to do this, like, sledgehammer to it. We're like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to normalize everything. And I kind of hate that type of thing, and I really try to avoid it wherever we can. And it's kind of one of those annoying things where as games get, like, as you do more and more of this balance stuff, you kind of end up with more of these kind of normalization procedures that go on. And so it's nice if we can find ways to avoid it if we can. And that's kind of why I like to try and pitch everything. Like, we started with in PoE 2 with a lot of things having, like, going back on a lot of those sort of normalization procedures we did from PoE 1. And ideally, we would be able to find different solutions that don't involve having to do that. You know, yeah, it's one of those things that I worry we might still having to do some of that stuff in order to fix problems. But
Why just
ideally, we
not
can
do
avoid it,
it
and
like
that's kind of why we
if it's about
went
dot,
back on some of
dot
that, those
damage, like
normalization
Diablo
procedures
1
from
did
PoE
it.
2.
It
So
was
one point,
based
just real quick
on
here about bleeding
the
in
skill level
particular,
you
if you're talking
had.
about bleeding,
Mhm.
since
So
you
like
can't bleed on
21,
energy shield, bleeding
whatever.
style element
Then
is
just
basically disabled
average
the
it,
energy shield
like
to mobs.
from your
So
character's base
feelings on that,
damage
is that
to
something
it.
that's just like, well, that's as intended?
So it doesn't matter
Can't
what your hit
bleed
is, it's
on
just based
energy
on the
Yeah.
damage you have on your character.
If you're running like a,
Exactly.
unless you're breaking the energy
That could be
shield,
really
your
good.
hit's not going to apply bleed
And
on
just
energy shield. For instance.
stack whatever that damage
thought that
value
the-
is
I don't
to
think
get
that's
really
even
good
true.
dots.
I thought that the thing
Exactly,
with bleed
then
was it's
crit
supposed to
doesn't
bypass
matter.
energy shield.
Yeah.
It does,
Yeah,
but you can only apply a bleed if the hit deals damage to the life pool. So if you're playing CI, you're essentially immune to poison, care, and bleed.
I will take your word for that, but if that is how that works,
It
that
wasn't
is
how it was
not
intended to
how
be,
that
how
is
it was.
meant to work.
Yeah, it's
I
supposed to be
only, I only say this because yesterday I heard someone upstairs talking about this and going
They're
like,
trying to
people are
nerf
just
bleed
wrong.
on
You
CI.
can apply bleed to energy of it. Look, and then I was like, okay, but I'll confirm that after this. And look, if that is how that works, that is like
bleed was actually supposed
Not
to be like an
supposed- yeah.
anti-mage mechanic, not a like, you know, like as in like you can
Yeah,
bleed
yeah,
someone past their energy shield. So
Well, if,
like that
if
was kind
you
of the
are
idea
right,
there. So
and I'm wrong,
Yeah.
then Quinn has thrown me under the bus because I asked that question from him. So
well, again, we'll take.
we could easily be wrong. Like it's amazing
It also
how
could
yeah.
be that it has
Yeah.
been changed internally and not yet externally. That is
Right.
another thing also. And like someone may have fixed this some 2 weeks ago and we never
Yeah.
got it live or something. Who knows? Like,
Yeah.
I'll look into it. It's not meant to
Yeah.
work that way.
So people might just start getting one shot by bleed if they're CI
all right,
without knowing what the hell's going on.
Here we are on elements.
That'd be
Please
bad.
don't.
And now we are into ascendancy swapping is the next topic here. So these are kind of going back to conversations we've had previously in interviews where you guys were debating it and you wanted to see after the launch of the game, where do we stand?
Personally, I still like not being able to swap. I know no one will like that hot take.
You're a terrible
And there are plenty of other
decision maker
developers
if you
here,
like
and
not
I remember
swapping.
even pitching it, and I was like, "Is this your hill to die on? Is this what you believe?" But that being said, I still prefer that decision being ultra important, and I prefer that decision being locked in. But it's one of those ones that's really hard to rationalize why it's better one way or the other. To be honest. Like, it wouldn't be the end, like, that hard to actually convince me the otherwise, because it is not the hill I would die on, that's for damn sure. So I don't know, it's like, I have my preference. I don't know why I have my preference that way. I guess I just like more decisions, especially about characters, to be a bit more final, but that being said, we have respeccing of everything else. I don't know. I don't really know where we're going to go with this one, aside from, like, sure, we'll reevaluate it and we'll see. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of developers that feel very strongly, and then we feel one way, and we discuss it with those people, and
play around and see what
we
you
kind of
like
see where we land. But
without
like,
having to
we're
spend an
not going
extra
to
50
ignore,
hours.
you know, the
looking up a
opinions
character.
and preferences of our
Yeah.
team, either our design team and whatnot.
Not everyone
you know,
is living the life of a game
just to
developer
overrule
and
it
can
just
just play
because,
this game forever.
That being said,
Exactly.
I sit on one side of that fence for sure, that probably the majority of players do not sit on.
I mean, I'm 55% in favor of re-rolling ascendancies personally, so it's very hard for me to argue against it when I would say that I would allow it. But I'm also, once again, like, other people on the team feel more strongly.
I mean, what I would be open to is, like, I understand you have to go online to have a look at what those ascendancy classes are, but I would be more open to having in-game things where when you're creating your character, you know, I don't want to not in a way that wouldn't overcomplicate it for new players, where they're like, oh, what are all these? What are ascendancy classes?
You
What's
pick
going
your
on
ascendancy
here?
class
I'm
before you
not really
even
in
know
favor
what
of
you're
that
going to do
argument
with your
personally,
build.
because I don't think that you are equipped at the point of the start of the game.
I don't
to
think
be
it's
able to
fair to
assess
lock
what
you
the
in
ascendancy classes
immediately.
are, so kind of does. I don't really think that really holds
Well,
water.
less for new players, I guess.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then again, experienced players already know how to get that information. So, I don't know the right solution there, honestly, but you
Just
can bet it's going to
let it
come
be
up
possible.
in discussions another
What's so hard
you
about
know,
that?
55
Yeah, it
times
doesn't
this
hurt
year,
anybody
so.
to be able to
Sure,
like,
we're just at the start of it.
try Chayula. Oh
Again,
no,
we don't want to
Chayula's
take too much of
terrible.
your
Go
time, so let's
back. I
keep
don't
up
care
with,
what the
I
cost
have an
is.
idea.
Questions, and the first one here
Make
is,
it
given the
super
current
expensive
50K,
gold
the time to
wise.
kill of Pinnacle Bosses by many of the
God
stronger
damn it.
builds in the game, I guess the question
You
is,
hate
what is
that
the
idea,
goal
but
for
you're
build
suggesting it.
power? Is one-shotting Pinnacle Bosses an intended power level for builds, or is
I
it
mean,
you
for
intended
the
to assign
possibility
something
to
else?
switch
It
Just a short
should
ascendancies,
definitely
sure.
not be the case that the first time you fight a Pinnacle boss that you one-shot it. Like, that's the kind of thing that maybe you can get to after
I mean,
crazy
at
amounts
least
of
try
like
it in
extra
early
items
access,
being
though.
found,
That's
but
the
you shouldn't
time
be
when you
doing that
can
the first time
try
you play it. So yeah, it's
things.
not right, and that's just
You want people
there's
to
some
be
builds that are
testing.
outrageous.
Yes,
We
exactly.
want to actually make it so the boss can use their abilities.
Goes
That's
hand
why
in
we spend a
hand.
bunch of time making them, after all.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
When you
All right,
first
we'll
get
move
there
on.
and you're kind of relatively equipped for it, it shouldn't like it should still be a 1 to 3 minute fight kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
And
a
I'm
good,
not talking about
preference.
He
1
wants it to
minute
be
of
a 1
emerging.
to
I'm talking 1 to 3
3
minutes
fight
of actual skill combat.
at like tippy top level, then the boss
It's
needs to
super
not be able to
long.
one-shot you.
Moving forward,
Yeah.
knowing that's the kind of the
If
the
it's
goal
one-shotting
for
you,
the vision.
1 to 3
Next
minutes of
question is,
dodging
given the
one-shots is going to be
difficulty of
extremely
requirements
unpleasant.
to get the 7th and 8th ascendancy
Hey there,
points,
kitty.
is this intended to be something that not all average players can acquire?
We definitely wanted the final ascendancy points to be something that was
Oh,
like a
chunkers.
significant like goal. Like, this is an awesome, like it's supposed to be quite a thing when you get the last 2 points. Yeah. I mean, as for an average player versus not, that's kind of hard to answer. I mean, I don't know if the average player gets halfway through maps really.
I don't agree with that take
So
either.
like, yeah,
I feel like
it
it
sort of
should
depends on
be
the definition. But we
doable
wanted
for
it to be a
everybody.
big thing that you get.
So
It's a big
map
thing, but
clear
don't make it
conditions, talking
impossible
about that for, a
for
moment.
some people.
Clearing rare
Yeah.
mobs are effectively like the only.
If you're
real
not a
map
bossing
clear,
build, if you're a
condition at the
mapping
moment.
build,
Is that
you
the
just
plans to
can't
continue
kill
that
the
going
boss.
forward, or is this sort of one of many conditions and is a placeholder, or how do you guys
Yeah.
feel about the map clear condition being strictly rare mob clearance?
I suspect as we get to answering the exact same thing we talked about before with the more objective driven and learning
there
and
might be more stuff to do.
tutorialization, we'll probably expand on that.
Mhm.
The ideal world is there'd be a whole, a nice cool set of different things you're doing in each map that isn't just killing all the rares, but actually a surprisingly
cat.
large amount of work to do those and to do them well.
Pablo.
Otherwise, you just end
Pablo
up with this
S-cat
thing where it's
bar.
like, oh, I like this one, but these other 4
Awesome.
are terrible, and I
You
keep
don't want bad.
randoming into
You
those.
don't want bad
Yeah.
ones of these, and
Yeah.
killing the monsters is at least something that you already want to do. So that's kind of part of the reason why
Yeah.
we sort of went with that in the end.
So
Yeah, there's certainly more work. Sorry, go.
No, okay. So the Atlas tree currently is gated basically behind Pinnacle Boss progression. Kind of the same type of question as in clear conditions. Is this going to be mandated in the same moving forward, or are you guys looking to add in more iterations of progression on the Atlas tree outside the Pinnacle Boss clear?
We did discuss
like this
changing how
question a lot.
how the core of
Yeah,
the
I was
Atlas,
also thinking that.
progression is, but as for the actual
Like,
Pinnacle,
all questions
as
in
for the
general are
individual league
really
trees,
progressive. I like
think
that.
we were still keen to sort of have that be
Yeah, Darth's
the
doing
kind
a
of
solid
extra
job.
stuff that you really get at the end
Yeah,
of that
to get
thing.
the Pinnacle
Yeah.
Boss's tree, it should be killing the Pinnacle Boss. We
Yeah.
want to keep that for sure.
Sure.
And for each of the contents. But yeah, I want to upgrade the core Atlas tree for sure. I think it's quite boring and flat right now. There's not a lot going on there. And part of that is to do with as we add more content, it will make it more interesting. But there's certainly a better job we can do of that. And how you acquire the points, again, getting away from that grind and getting into more like, all right, like do this 2 points, do this 2 points, do this 2 points, not grind this 2 points, grind this 2 points for the actual core tree. For the sub trees, for the
Fight
leagues,
the boss
yeah,
for
I
3
actually
minutes, fight
do
the boss
like
for
them
3
being
minutes, sure.
behind that. But ideally, each league would then have its own meta system within it to amplify itself in some way, which we don't currently have a lot of. So it's something we'd be looking into in the future when we're upgrading the existing content as opposed to adding new content.
All right. I bet all of our chats have been spamming this, so I'm just going to throw it out right away. Map tab when?
That should be reasonably soon, shouldn't it?
Yeah, it's an as soon as possible thing. We've got people working on it right now.
Okay.
As soon as it's done, you'll have it.
Good.
Like, it was not a yeah.
Yeah, it'll be done soon.
We wanted it there
Done
for
soon.
release.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Be done soon.
Let's go to tech questions, optimizations, and bugs, kind of a little category we have. And
Thank
then I'm going
you.
to do some minion questions for you guys as well. Appreciate you guys taking
Please
the time. I
don't
know we're
crash
going a little
my
bit above the
instance
time here.
anymore.
First question we have is something you talked about in a previous interview, I believe, with the
Multi-threading.
Cicerone. It was predictive network mode and lockstep. What is the reasoning behind this specific topic, or what's your take on it, seeing how people are performing right now with this?
I actually haven't hugely investigated this, to be honest. I don't know if you've got any more information about that.
I do not.
Yeah.
I mean, we just have lockstep right now.
Oh, the predictive's just not. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not
we
that.
only
Yeah,
have
yeah,
lockstep
okay,
currently,
right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we just need to fix that, right? Yeah, like honestly, the people who would be working on that have not even come back from break yet, so it's just not something that that we've got. But yeah, we do need to get that working.
2 weeks.
I think it was just
New Year's,
disabled
and not
mostly
back
out of
from break.
caution, right? Because we just expected lots of shit would be broken.
There was a few things. I can't remember
Right.
exactly what they were.
But yeah,
there
we
were,
need to get it
there were
sorted.
some things that didn't work
Yeah.
in that mode, and we had to re-engineer them.
Yeah.
And yeah, no time.
Yeah, we'll get to it though.
Okay, a couple just real quick optimization type of questions here. Terrain obstruction is something that has been helped a little bit in this recent, we saw in the video there, you guys were talking about making it a little bit more clear and transparent. But some things like trees, for instance, covering your screen from the overhead, etc. Do you have any feelings on how terrain obstruction is currently in the game? And is there any plans around making this a little bit
It's just a matter of individual work on
Yeah.
each individual thing, just like looking at each doodad and being like, yeah, what the bounds need to be, that kind of thing.
That some trees don't fade out
Yeah,
until you're like intersecting with them.
Sure,
And it's
just-
annoying because
yeah.
you get more, and the faster you move, the more you will be obscured. And so there's some timing changes, there's some proximity changes. There's
Just a matter of individual
bunch
balance
of
things.
you
To be
know,
addressed.
There's still some areas.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then as far as optimization is concerned, I mean, we'll just keep working on it, right? I mean, in the background, you've got the engine guys working on things. There is one very annoying crash that is very, very hard to debug that happens on, I believe it only happens on NVIDIA cards. Where like after sort of an hour or an hour and a half kind of thing, you'll get a crash to desktop, and it's been
Less than
very,
that.
very difficult to track down, and we're adding more debug stuff. In fact, I think there'll be a patch. If we can't work it out internally, we'll actually probably eventually make a patch where we tell people to like turn on a command line flag that will enable extra debug information, because the thing that will allow us to debug this does reduce frame rates by like 5%. So we might actually ask people to like, hey, turn this on until we find the problem, and then it'll reduce your frame rates a little bit, but it'll help us track it down. And then once we've got that, then we should be able to work it out. Effectively, they're like concurrency bugs within the GPU. But annoyingly, we were also told that the next version, like NVIDIA told us that the next version of the NVIDIA driver does make the crash go away. But then they also said that they didn't know why that was the case. So I don't know if we can 100% rely on that either. So yeah, there's something weird going on that's like quite hard to track down going on here. And hopefully we can work it out soon. But yeah, we just need we need more debug information. It's very hard to track down, unfortunately.
Got it.
And it's kind of annoying how it takes so long to reproduce. Like there's even a thing where like the first hour after we do a restart patch, we don't get any of those crashes because it literally takes more than an hour to reproduce. And then after that, they start coming in. So there's like something weird going on there. But it's the most common crash, and like we're just like really annoyed. It's just very annoying to deal with.
Thanks for the answer, because that was a very common question. People were talking about crashes and wanted to ask you about it. So good answer there. At this portion, all we have left is some minion questions from Ghazi, just a couple of them. And then we're into the rapid fire portion, and then we're pretty much done. So try to get you out of here in 10, 15 minutes. Go on, Ghazi.
Sure.
Let's just dive into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about Hodor. Minion body blocking in doorways.
Best way to put it.
Let me just add the word, come on.
So,
Solutions,
I
please.
mean, yeah, like this is something that we need to work out a better solution for. Like what I can say is that, okay, so people will immediately say, oh, just make it so that minions can just walk through each other. And it's like, we've done that and it sucked. And it doesn't just suck because of that it looks bad or something. Like it sucks to actually, like, it actually just makes the minions play worse. So we need to find another solution that's like smarter somehow that like fixes that issue. One thing we are planning on doing, just as an initial test that we've got, I believe someone's doing at the moment, is at least making it so that when minions die due to distance, that they respawn immediately near your character rather than it waiting until the next refresh. So like that'll at least maybe help a bit, but I don't know if it's like the full solution by any means. But there's something we have to do around this, but I honestly don't know quite what it is yet. And as I said, like all of the obvious solutions, as you might say, we have tried and they weren't great. So it really is going to take something a little bit more complicated to do
How would
to
it make it
work out
feel
what
worse
we're
if
doing
they
here.
don't
But yes,
have
I
a collision
appreciate
to
the issue
interact with each
for
other?
sure.
It
Like
feels
I'm
like
not
it would
saying
be
that we're not going to do something about it because we have
just
to.
an instant
I'm
win.
just saying that like it's
Yeah, it
not
would be a
clear,
quality of life
yet what
change.
that is.
My
And
thoughts,
at the
though.
very least, in the meantime, we can do the respawn instantly
Like,
for
yeah,
upon
they
tiring,
might overlap and look
distancing
funky,
out,
but
which will help a little
Who
bit maybe.
cares?
But
yeah.
more needs to be done.
It's one of the
You
big
won't see
problems
that
people
in
complain
a
about with
For
the
sure,
build,
for
yeah.
sure.
full map.
For them rubber banding to you resurrecting is much better than them dying, because that is part of my other question I had here.
Yeah, yeah.
However, in PoE 1, there is a feature added as a modifier.
I mean,
on
instead of
boss,
skeletons,
boss
make
abilities
ghosts
that
and then
you're
you just
supposed
walk
to, as a
through them.
player, dodge.
Oh,
where
that's
minions
a good
can't,
idea.
You can't control them, so they do less damage to them. PoE 2 doesn't seem to have this based on the data mine I've been checking, which seems to be that they're just expected to literally just die, and then you have to sit there and wait for them to resurrect. What's the reasoning for not giving us convocation, which would also assist in the whole minion body blocking doorways and tight corridors?
Are there not minion things in the AI? I thought we did do some of that.
Not that I've seen.
And that's the minion guy, so he would know.
I can't remember exactly an AI.
So no, I mean the damage.
From
thing,
a damage perspective, not hugely, no. We were tinkering around with this whole expectation of like how often, if you have like no investment and all this, how often are your minions supposed to be permanent minions, supposed to be dead versus alive, and then what are the things you can do to keep them alive? Because it was meant to be more in order to have your minions, otherwise they're never dead, right? They're permanently alive, and then the DPS is you just running around doing whatever you're doing.
That is really the issue, just to be clear, is that if we make it so that boss abilities aren't killing your minions, then that means that that would effectively mean your minions would just never die. And so then what's the...
It was meant to be more of active, what are you doing to keep them alive actively? And we haven't got that right. Like, for sure, we haven't got that right. So like, I guess bone offering was meant to be one of those examples of like boss slams coming, and then, but also then you got a multi-thread. You got about how do I survive and how do I do this at the same time. So there's certainly something going wrong there where we haven't, and I believe there's probably still a lot of boss abilities that just haven't been tuned correctly with respect to, you know, again, how often they're killing certain minions versus not. Because there will be things, I'm assuming, that are just completely unavoidable, and they just wipe out your entire minion thing, and then it's like, well,
for the most part,
what was I even
reviving
supposed
minions.
to do? So,
I mean, I had very little interaction.
the problem is,
with
as soon as you get into this build, the level of like detail that you have to do, where you not only have
it dying to the boss.
Sure, there might be some system change, and it's easy to probably do a cop
Yeah, I
out
really don't
that's
have
just
an
like,
opinion on
whatever.
that.
You know, it's actually the right answer is to go through every
like
single
it's not in a
boss
bad
and
spot.
test them and go through monsters
Except
and go through
for
mods and
the
like,
quality
it's
of life of
huge,
dealing with
huge
minions
amount of
blocking
detail
you.
and takes quite a long
Yeah.
time.
Blocking each other.
We have people like kind
I
of
like
actively
minion
providing
builds,
that more
but
specific feedback, and
what it
we
is
are
now, what
iterating
I
on
saw, looks
it.
super
But
boring
there's
to me.
still
The fire
certainly a
circle and
handful
shit.
of things we need to do. Otherwise, well, I'd say that blocking the doorways is a more catastrophic problem for sure. Like where they just like can't get through, and they're like running off screen and them dying. So like we're focusing more on that stuff first.
I want a
and
stun
then we'll
monk.
probably get back to the boss specific balance
Yeah,
with respect to how
there's
often
like
certain
the
skills
wind
are
wave
just
and all
wiping
that.
out all your
That
minions and
seem like
all
it
of
could work, but it just
Yeah, I
doesn't.
mean, I understand the idea
I
that
played
the
that
bosses
wind
are supposed
wave
to kill.
thing
The problem is when the bosses
until
get
start
damage
of
over time
endgame
effect
and
on
was
them. They kill a
awesome. I
bunch of
loved
them,
it.
your timer starts ticking.
I just
and
found
then
it
the dot kills
chunked
the
my
next one,
mana
it resets,
so
and it
hard.
kills the next one, it resets.
Yeah.
You just have to wait for all of them to die, and now you're sitting there doing nothing. You feel
I did a
tried-
combination of
wheelchair
Ice
and
Strike
able
and
to
that.
run around.
Ice Strike felt
But an
really
instant
good leveling.
used convocation
Yeah.
would be a
Inhibitor
solution to
felt
that, which would also
awful
help
at the
with
start,
whole body
and
block.
then
A lot
Ice
of
Strike
people
felt
just
great,
spamming me about
and
making
now
give this
come endgame
convocation,
that's
and I'm
kind of
in that
flipped. So
category as
maybe
well.
maybe the wind wave
But
is good
moving on
now.
to the other
I haven't
question,
tested
not
it
wasting much
since I
time,
got to endgame.
and that is a very interesting question.
Would be a fun
What is
idea
the
to check it
reasoning
out.
behind making the minions' movement speed a direct replicator copy of what you have as a player, including when you get a minion movement speed debuff reduction on yourself?
So me and Mark were actually quite surprised to learn that when you get a debuff on your character, that it causes your minions to slow down.
yeah, it's not intended.
That was not intentional, and so we'll just fix it.
We'll just change that.
Yeah, we'll just fix it. That was not a thing we even realized was the case.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one is tooltip is a bit wonky with the minions, with it being incorrect in cases, especially accuracy actually being very wildly off, where it says you have a 100% chance to hit and it's not hitting, and then the tooltip is missing altogether on things like rating spirits. And sometimes when you change a gem on an unrelated ability, suddenly your tooltip on your damage minions is also changing randomly.
Also,
something
Dagger
that
Monk.
Sounds like a bug to me.
Yeah,
Oh,
fix
yeah,
that as
that'd
soon
be
as-
really
I'll
fun.
just need to
I'm
figure
looking
out
so
how to-
wa- so forward to
Well,
that.
they might be back today.
Just
Our
any
developer
martial weapons,
responsible
like
for that
monks
has
use
still been on
swords, they
holiday,
use
so as soon as
staves, they
they're
use
back,
nunchucks, they use their
Yeah.
get onto
fists.
fixing them.
Yeah.
There's a
I
lot
hear there's
of
quite a lot of
avenues they could
rushed,
go about.
like description stuff happening right at the end of development.
Dagger's
there.
probably
So
gonna
I'm
be
sure
more
there's
of
stuff, even
the,
more stuff that's wrong than that.
Trickster
just like with that
Scepter
I'm
class.
surprised that
Mhm.
tooltip stuff is as good as it is.
I think it's
given,
called Shadow,
Like, I remember
and
2 weeks before release, I was like, "This is a
when
dead
that comes
feature,
out, that's
like,
probably what I'm
this
going to be
may as well
playing.
not
That was my
exist."
favorite class in
And then
PoE
all of a
1.
sudden, it was at least something that I was like, "Okay, that's a pretty good effort on what they did." So, there's just more to do, though, of course.
I got plenty more minion questions, but I'm just gonna go with the one that's been spammed the most, and that's Spectres when.
So
There's the ghosts.
Soon, fairly soon. It took more work than we expected, actually. Like, there was just a lot of there was a lot of specific shit we have to do, but it won't be. It's not too far away.
Almost all their answers
Well,
are
the
soon.
designers have to go through, all the monster designers have to go through
Almost
and make
all their
spectrable
answers
versions
are,
of every
it's coming
monster,
soon.
Which in
Yeah.
PoE 1 was a lot
Not
easier,
so
and in
much.
PoE 2,
We have it in
there's
the works.
so
This is
much
coming.
more manual designer-based scripting on like a monster-to-monster basis
Like
that we
in the
have
patch,
to like
I mean.
take out all of that random stuff to do with dialogue and like, 'cause
Well,
you don't want
for
to
me,
all of
it
a sudden
sounds
like
like
have
the
a
same.
spectre come out and then you're like, it dies and your character says some random thing, and because all of a sudden now your character's just spamming
For some reason, I
random
think
dialogue all the time.
it
and,
will
like,
come in a month.
There's even stuff that's kind of stupid where it's like,
Because
the
they say
idle
soon.
animation
For
of
me,
this
soon is
monster
like a month. I
loud.
don't know.
And so if you've
yeah,
got
that's
a
fair.
spectre, then like it makes it too annoying. And, like,
soon is
just there's all sorts of
later
random
in the
stuff that
week.
happens when you turn things into a spectre that's kind of not obvious.
Yeah.
effectively every single
That's
monster
not
has
a
to be
video game soon.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
we
It's a
don't want to
video game
repeat those
soon.
same problems, right?
Yeah.
So ideally, the audio team actually gets time to do proper spectre mastering, so to speak, on all their audio for all the monsters. But no, I believe the designers are almost done with their part, which means it's then just audio and then a whole metric, which has been happening in parallel, but a whole metric ton of balance testing to make sure that we're not just, I mean, which is a lot, by the way. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong with these
Well,
things.
balancing the spirit cost of each of these is going to be an
and
interesting.
testing it with every array of support gems.
Yeah.
And, monsters can be set up kind of jank, where you're like, yeah, that's like a projectile, but like it's using some other skill that's kind of actually like triggering projectiles. And so if you actually put, multiple projectiles on it, it might not affect it in the way you think. And like from a damage perception of like, I take less damage from projectiles, that's fine. From an avoidance perspective, it's fine. But then there'll be some weird thing where, because, with like player skills, we actually code every single skill, like, exactly here's how it's meant to work. It's like quite intricate. With monsters, we're cowboys. We just go ballistic and just set them up to make sure that they're good. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, right, we had to make a spectre of this. Okay, well, and then you have to hack a bunch of stuff together. But, it's also what allows us to be able to make a ludicrous amount of monsters all the time. But yes, now you have to make spectres of all of them, which is... You're almost done. We've almost caught up to where we were, so I'd say, soon, whatever soon means.
Not too far. Sure.
All right, so we are in the last portion. 5 minutes, some rapid fires. We'll fit whatever we can in within this 5 minutes, and we're done at this point. Thanks for going 10 minutes over at this point. So
That's all right.
I'm just going to pick random ones here. Search feature on an atlas, so you can search like.
Yep, we definitely should have that. This was something we even said before we even released, but we just never got time to do. But yeah, we'll do that.
So are you
at some
putting
point.
it
Got it.
On the list.
On the list?
Tornado Bird
Just
in
listed.
the game for Ultimatum is the hardest boss in the entire game, in my opinion. Personally, do you have
I
any
believe that's
feeling-
resolved, and 011 does have changes to that one. I
Okay,
believe.
he's ridiculous.
I
Got
saw it on the
Thank
list.
you.
I saw it on the patch notes.
All right.
Yeah, I
Just
can't remember
drop
what
them,
skills.
bro.
Oh, yeah,
It was the tornado. Like it was more avoidable or something. There was some stuff. It is in the specific boss balance that got addressed in this.
We'll see
011.
after the
He's
patch,
insane.
and then we'll make more changes
Yeah.
if needed. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so Auction House. We're getting spammed about this all the time. You've answered many questions. How are your guys' feelings about an Auction House or in-game purchasing or buyout on the website or anything related to that?
I mean, I've talked about what we could do before. I don't have anything to announce right now.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll discuss this more. I'm sure this will come up again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Accessibility question. Red-green color blindness is the most common in the world.
Yeah.
It's my understanding.
Yeah.
Obviously, red on green is a very common thing within Path of Exile 2, specifically in Ultimatum, which is a mandated Ascendancy trial. So for any plans around accessibility
Just
features
blinding
for
a
this?
lot of players. unnecessarily?
Well, effectively, that's usually what we do for the stuff. Is rather than having a mode for it, we tend to just make sure that each thing, like, we test it on people who are actually colorblind. So I just need to get probably Reese to just test all the stuff specifically because I know he's red-green colorblind, and just make sure that they're actually distinguishable. I generally prefer rather than having modes for it to like have
people with that color blindness highlighting the areas. So ultimatum, as you said, being bad gives us a target, and we'll start someone there.
Yeah.
Sure. Speaking of visibility, rare and blue mobs. Can't really tell they're rare and blue mobs, or magic mobs, I should say. There's no highlight on them like in PoE 1. You know how there's like a little highlight around them? So you can't.
So the intention is that you can tell when a monster is based on the effect of the actual thing itself. There might be some cases where we're just not being successful in that regard, and so we just need to improve it.
We're going to do more there, and we are going to try some things that are give them magic and rare identifiers that aren't. The glows just really took you out of the, like, when you're in a dark dungeon and you're exploring it, like, just,
and honestly,
what the heck is this glowing beacon of light over here?
I just wish Fresnel glow was just banned in games generally. Like, it's just everyone just relies on it. Like, oh, we need to make this more visible. Add a Fresnel glow to it. Like, it's just this freaking it's cancer in games generally. Sorry, this is just a random side rant from me, but I just hate the fact that everyone lazily goes to Fresnel glow and freaking everything.
Fair enough. Last question related to visuals. So visual effects in co-op can be very difficult. You know, you got people spamming lots of shit around.
Especially if there's minions on the screen, you can't even tell if it's an enemy or
other
not.
people's visual effects, etc.
I don't want to add an option like that, but there is probably more we can do automatically for that kind of stuff.
There'll be some engine-based things.
Janky as it might sound,
there's probably more we can do, and just like but in my opinion, it should be automatic, and like you shouldn't even really be thinking about it. It should just happen. Like I'm not a fan of just like, oh, turn off all the effects.
or even like customizable to fully filled
Fair enough.
green.
Disenchanting flasks for quality. They're one of the things you can't salvage in the game currently in order to get like the quality baubles back that you'll be able to do on flasks.
Also concerning Ice Strike, the particles on that, you sometimes don't see on-ground effects from rares or something when they die or whatnot.
Just smash the glass.
That's really annoying.
Why it is, but
yeah, because
I have
you can attack so fast with that
Yeah.
stream of ice in the air.
We can probably
just
use
blinds
that, right?
you.
Like,
I think it was more like,
exactly.
you know, let's do something interesting for Flask salvaging and crafting later and save that, but we can add it for now.
We should just add it. I have no problem adding it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we should probably nerf the drop rate of flasks slightly. High levels. That's just a random note that I was thinking about yesterday as I was picking up tons of flasks. Random side note. But
We've almost got all of them. Checkpoints and maps in order to backtrack in maps. How do you feel about that?
So not for resurrecting purposes,
just
for fast travel purposes.
It's not a terrible idea. I'd have to think a little bit about how we would position those. I'm not against it necessarily. I guess the feeling is that there's not so many like objectives in maps in the same way.
When you do those linear maps and you missed a rare monster, you want to go play something else for a while.
You're right. But, so yeah, we should probably do something about this, but I don't have an exact understanding of what we would need to do.
God, I hope
Sure.
they do notes.
On the table, however.
They
Okay.
make notes.
Being able to see gems without cutting. Currently, like you got to cut the gem to look at the list of skills.
I mean, I don't
think
really have
they're gonna
anything
keep
against it,
that.
but where the hell does the option go? I'll think about that. I'm not really against that.
Yeah.
Maybe on the G button, top, click at all skills.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Something?
maybe.
Alright.
Maybe.
Gambler in the hideout. We have all the other vendors, but we don't have like a gambler in the hideout. For instance, like Alba
The
normally does
reason
this.
for that, what was there was something very broken at the end, and we quickly turned it off. But I think we just need to fix one thing and then turn it back on. There was something very bad exploitation tier, and so we were just like disable. It's like 10 minutes until deployment kind of thing.
4 left, and we got through all of them. Okay, so Venom Quest is currently the only one that you can't reselect the
Thank
reward.
you.
So, for instance, you can reselect like the Titan Dome with the Life Flask or the Charm Duration. You can't select from like Chaos to Attributes or whatever. Any opinions on keeping that permanent, or can we reselect?
I want to add a way to change that, which I know people might be like, well, hold on, then why don't you want to allow a way to change ascendancies? And the answer is I don't know. That's just how I feel. But
we'll allow you to change.
I might feel differently later. But yes, I do want to add a way to change that for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
Movement speed on boots.
Good.
Any
That's
feelings about
needed.
having them be implicit, or I mean, basically movement speed mandatory on boots, or else you're really slowed down. So, how you guys feel about moving movement speed to implicits, or do you have any feelings on movement speed on boots?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a problem to have a mod that's really, really valuable on an item that you definitely want to go for. Like, boots is certainly the case where that's like the most extreme, but I don't necessarily think it's a problem as such. So, you know, like, I personally don't have a problem with it. But I don't know.
I feel like
I
they're
like
trying
it.
to
I
stick
like
too
having
hard
that, like,
onto PoE 1
I think it's
style
good.
instead of
I
trying
mean,
to
if you added move speed
don't
implicitly
want
to
to
boots, would you then be like, okay, well, like
make
IPD
the
on
obvious
weapons,
things.
like you start to get into funny territory in some sense.
I mean,
right?
if you
Where, like,
only play warrior,
you know,
fine.
So anyway, that's kind of our feeling on it.
Last two, UI customization options. Is that potential?
I mean, you'd have to be more specific.
I think people just want
in
to be
general, no. Like,
yeah,
if you're looking at like
like we're not going to be World of Warcraft like like UI mod type there. But yeah, like if there's something specific, then you're like, I wish we could do this. Then maybe we would think about it. It's just a question of what
more
it
of
is.
a generic question I was getting. Okay,
Yeah,
last one, boys. State of co-op and body blocking. Body blocking your co-op here.
I think it's
leveling with friends. I accidentally
There's
locked
something
them
not right
in a
about it.
hallway.
There's something
when I
not right
went
about
away.
it. I agree, but I do think you
Oh,
do
no.
need it to make things feel more physical. But there is something not right about it.
Just make it
There
like
shouldn't be, considering that players
transparent to any
are
allies.
actually... You know what it is? It's
Exactly.
because we changed really, really close
It's
to the end of
that
development the
easy.
size of the player,
And
instead
no
of
one
changing the size
will
of all the monsters.
want to see
I think
rolling
that
heads,
probably
like, you know.
results in like a situation.
Even if it's only
but, yeah,
you
but
can
there's something
roll
not right about
past
it. But
them,
I
that's
don't want to
fine.
just completely remove
Sure.
it. We might end up with a solution
if
where
they
like the size of a
really
player to
wanted
other players is different than what the
to
size is
keep,
to other monsters or something like that, in order to kind
collision
of like
player to
ease
player
it. I
thing,
suspect we'll do something along those
just roll
lines.
past 'em.
So
Yeah, make it
I'll-
roll
that is it.
point-
It wasn't
point-
really on my
point
radar,
zero.
I have to admit,
It-
but we should do
It
something
definitely
about this.
promotes too much troll behavior.
You'll forgive me for asking one last question that I'm curious about myself. In terms of microtransactions coming from PoE 1 to PoE 2, do we have any cadence or quantity or any information we can give them when we're going to be seeing more of our previous purchases?
Well, the main thing is that by the time we go out of early access, we have to have all of them. As for the like rate at which they come through, I mean, look, we'll try and get as many as we can in the near future. I honestly like. This is so the rigging team are like busy doing that, and I haven't paid enough attention to them. I need to go catch up with them and ask them, hey, how's that job going that I see you going on?
It's probably it turned into more work than we initially anticipated for sure. There's like a whole bunch of effects that don't translate one to one, so there's a lot of departments that have to do a lot of work. They are tuning through it. That being said, like, you know, it was certainly more complicated before when we were in that last like several month or 3-4 month like kind of lead up to release, and it was kind of like, okay, we need to have all hands on deck getting certain game content done, and yeah, we generally prioritize gameplay over microtransactions when, especially in those kind of moments. And so now it's going to ease up a bit, and we can allocate some resources, a bit more resources there to get more of them ported across. But yeah, it did end up being a little bit more work than we actually anticipated. It's not just like a copy paste job and it's done. Some things have to be like kind of re-authored to actually work in one over the other.
Unfortunately, it's difficult.
Mostly due to like lighting, I suppose.
Kind of would have
really
expected
is
it to
the
be
big
copy
difference.
paste.
Yeah, so I don't have an immediate cadence
But we don't
for
know
you,
what
but,
back end things they're dealing
we
with.
should start getting them coming out, like rolling out relatively soon.
All right, and I think that pretty much
I
wraps
think
it.
it's
There's,
fairly
We're
difficult.
getting spammed about Path of Exile 1
Manage all that.
3.26, but unless you want to talk about, you know...
Bit of a long topic to get into at this point.
Yeah, so I figured I'd just throw it out there, but
all
that's
good.
it. Guys, you want to wrap it up?
All right, excellent.
Let's just say thank you for coming. And, you know, it always happens. We say 1.5 hour. It always goes above. We very much appreciate you guys' time. And
We're like
sorry
2.5 hour almost.
going so long. But pleasure having you guys on. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And can't wait for the patch notes. And we'll see you guys very soon then.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you later.
I want to say thank you also. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Sorry it was 20 minutes extra, but thanks for your time.
We don't have a clock in here. You understand? You could have said it was the right amount of time, and we wouldn't know.
Oh man, I missed my last
we don't
one.
know how long it's been.
All right, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Perfect.
All right.
That's the stream. It looked pretty good. It seemed like with the opening video, they had a lot of good things promised, but then as the video went on, they kind of backtracked a bit, unfortunately, especially regarding the armor and warrior kind of buffs.
We're
But
back on camera and everything there too. All right. Holy moly. All right, chat. Sorry, we tried, guys. Look, we had 70.
I'll pause this. That's their stream. They've earned their own video. I'm not trying to steal their content. But yeah, I'm gonna have to watch this, give it another go through, but right now I'm gonna have to end everything. I got a very upset girlfriend who came home 2 hours ago and is getting no attention. Alrighty. Thanks for coming on, Lena.
Yeah,
Enjoyed
sure.
hanging out with you. Enjoyed hanging out with everybody else. You guys
I
in
enjoyed it
chat.
too.
Talk to you guys later.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye bye.